The boar wasn't scared. It was rampaging. The calm heart talisman can soothe a frightened beast, not stop one that's gone mad, Thomas warned, gripping Zheng Qing's shoulder to stop him from rushing in. Wizards never act on impulse. Do you even know what you're facing? Boar. Monster, Zheng Qing muttered, his scalp tightening. In countless tales, monsters were always savage, flesh-eating creatures. As a child, Zheng Qing imagined them lurking in caves, raising packs of jackals and wolves, kidnapping beauties, and roasting hapless travelers over open fires. They'd argue over culinary methods. Should they steam humans for tenderness or stir-fry for texture? Of course, he later realized those were just bedtime stories. Then came Hui Ziji. He had asked his teacher afterward, "Do monsters exist?" "Yes," the teacher said plainly. "Do they eat people?" "Yes." "So what do we do if we meet one?" The teacher gave him a surprised look. "Run, obviously. You're a frail scholar, not the Buddha offering himself to a starving eagle." As for what monsters looked like, his teacher's answers changed each time. Sometimes they were towering creatures with green skin and fangs, belching smoke and lava. Other times, they were just swarms of annoying insects. And sometimes, they looked exactly like humans. "You wouldn't know it's a monster," the teacher once said, "until it eats someone." Now, standing on the street of Four Seasons Pavilion, Zheng Qing stared at the raging wild boar demon and muttered, "So, monsters look like pigs? The teacher's a liar." The creature bellowed and charged into a nearby magic supplies shop. Its tusks knocked down the hanging wooden sign, then toppled a massive furnace that clanged and rolled across the street. Red-eyed and snorting, the beast turned toward its next target. "Is it brainless?" Zheng Qing asked, watching the demon thunder down the street like a panicked beast. "This is a newly turned wild demon," Thomas replied calmly from inside the protective barrier. "Its actions are pure instinct. You could say it's brainless." "What's a wild demon?" "The lowest rank of monsters. Apart from their leader, the Demon King, wild demons have no real intelligence. They're like hyenas, driven by hunger, bloodlust, and chaos. Wizards are their favorite snack." "Then why isn't it attacking anyone?" Zheng Qing asked. "Shouldn't it be biting people already?" "You've noticed the wizards, good. Now look above you." Zheng Qing looked up and saw the faint shimmer of a blue magical barrier. "Ah," he said, finally connecting the dots. The wild boar had now stumbled closer. Zheng Qing could see it clearly, froth dripping from its mouth and nose, eyes burning crimson with rage. A greasy Delian necklace hung around its thick neck. Something about it looked familiar. Squinting, Zheng Qing studied its features. The hairless, scorched pig head, the bloated cheeks, and triple chin folds. "This pig looks like that fat guy we saw at Cloud Think Boutique and Shangyuan Bookstore," he exclaimed. "The one with the ostrich egg head, triple chin, and oily Delian." Thomas didn't laugh. His expression darkened. The boar demon growled outside the barrier, its heavy breath fogging the shimmering shield. Zheng Qing stopped chuckling. His mouth went dry. A terrifying thought took root. The fat guy didn't turn into a pig, did he? "It's difficult for a wizard to turn into a pig voluntarily," Thomas said grimly. "But being turned into a wild demon? That's easy. All it takes is a bite." Zheng Qing shuddered. The boar raised its head and snorted, then began to slowly back away. Clutching the tranquility talisman tight, Zheng Qing edged closer to Thomas. "Sharp instincts," Thomas said with a smirk, eyes still fixed on the retreating beast. "You do well in Starry Sky College's freestyle fight competition." Zheng Qing turned pale, not because of the suggestion, but because the boar's crimson eyes hadn't looked away. They were locked onto him. "Why does it feel like it can see us?" he whispered. Thomas didn't answer. He silently flipped open his law book. Then, with a guttural roar, the demon charged, hooves pounding against the stone road. Zheng Qing didn't even have time to scream. The law book floated up, its pages fluttering as three glowing symbols lifted into the air. He recognized them immediately. In Chile, a sudden breeze swept through the still street. carrying fallen leaves with it as it blew toward the charging monster. Zheng Qing held his breath, frozen in place as he watched the wild boar thunder forward, tusks gleaming whiter than his blood-drained face. All around them, other wizards cried out in alarm. No one had expected this. The barrier was supposed to be foolproof, a top-grade spell approved by the Wizard Alliance, trusted by countless mages. And yet, right here and now, a wild demon was charging through that very protection, aiming for the two people behind it. Thomas stood firm. With a steady breath, he raised his left hand, still gripping the law book, and formed a sword seal with his right. He pointed toward the boar and roared, "Inchi lay, stand forth before this tusk." The streets of Four Seasons Pavilion were paved with long, glistening bluestone slabs, neat, ancient, and steeped in history. In peaceful times, the street would be bustling with tourists. Mischievous tree elves often swung from the weeping willows lining the road, leaping from head to head and occasionally dropping twig-crafted trinkets on unsuspecting passersby. But not today. Today, the elves had vanished into their tree holes, trembling as the ground quaked and the trees shivered from the deafening drumming that echoed through the street. The cause? A wild boar demon. It tore through the road, its stubby hooves pounding against stone in a clattering rhythm like rain on broad banana leaves, or a pig skidding across porcelain. 3 glowing runes, summoned from Thomas's floating law book, drifted into the air and dissolved into threads of invisible breath, merging with the surrounding wind. The tree elves pressed themselves deeper into their bark-lined shelters. Something ominous was building in the air. Zheng Qing's eyes widened. The atmosphere felt angry, electric, buzzing with invisible needles that pricked the skin with every breath. Thomas stood firm before him, exhaling deeply. A low, reverberating rumble began to swell, distant and vast, as though thunder had started crawling across the horizon. Then Thomas glanced back with a devilish grin. "Cover your ears," he yelled. Zheng Qing's mouth moved, but no sound came out. He clamped his hands over his ears just as the sky seemed to explode. The thunder wasn't a clap. It was a barrage. It roared like bursting fireworks, echoing endlessly, engulfing every other sound in its wrath. The air screamed. Even with his ears covered, Zheng Qing felt the vibration rattle through his bones. The world shook. Then came the lightning. It cracked down onto the wild boar monster like a hammer from the gods. The boar shrieked, its tusks slicing through the edge of the barrier as the blast engulfed it. Flesh tore from its hide in bloodied chunks, scattering across the bluestone in a grisly trail. The scent of ozone mingled with the sharp tang of roasted meat. Zheng Qing gagged. The storm faded as quickly as it came. The air, once furious, returned to its usual warm stillness. The tree elves slowly unfurled themselves in their hollows, but none dared emerge. Zheng Qing wiped his face, took a breath, and looked at the smoking remains of the demon. "Is it dead?" he shouted. His ears still rang, so he had to raise his voice just to hear himself. Thomas shouted back, "Probably just unconscious. A massage of this level won't kill it." "A massage!" Zheng Qing yelled, exasperated. "That spell nearly exploded on top of us. You'd lose points for that kind of insult at Starry Sky Academy." Thomas bellowed with a laugh. Zheng Qing scowled. He'd just had his first real taste of the Academy's chaotic brand of magic, and it only confirmed one thing. He was glad he didn't enter that dream exam room. Just hours earlier, Thomas had seemed serious and dependable. But after summoning a full-on divine lightning storm, that image was completely shattered. "You want to go check if it's still breathing?" Thomas asked. "I'll wait until my calm heart talismans fall," Zheng Qing said, tilting his head upward. When the thunder hit, he'd panicked and lost grip of his talismans. A few were scorched to ash mid-air, but 2 had survived, now gently spiraling down on warm air currents. He decided to wait. Ever since learning he was a broke wizard, Zheng Qing had become extremely careful about preserving anything even remotely valuable. At Cloud Think Boutique, he overheard students mentioning a flea market at the academy where one could trade talismans, potions, and spell components for supplies. That little rumor sparked something in him. He had a stash of talismans under his bed. Maybe they'd be worth something. Leaping up, he snatched the lower of the two talismans from the air and stuffed it into his gray satchel. The second talisman, disturbed by the air current, drifted further away. Catching his breath, Zheng Qing followed it deeper into the street. Behind him, Thomas was scribbling in his law book with a quill, glancing up just long enough to caution, "Don't go too far. Once I'm done transcribing this spell, we're heading back." "Got it," Zheng Qing muttered, eyes still locked on the talisman. The street remained quiet. Even the usual foot traffic had thinned out. Tree elves still cowered in their hollows. His footsteps echoed clearly on the stone path. Then he saw it. The second talisman hovered above the collapsed form of the wild boar demon. The creature's body was covered in bowl-sized wounds, blackened and sparking faintly. Its neck rolls were gone, exposing thick jawbones and broken tusks. The air smelled faintly of blood and singed hair. Zheng Qing kicked one of its hoofs. No movement. He tapped its belly. The flesh jiggled, but the beast remained still, eyes shut. He sighed in relief and looked back up at his drifting talisman. Finally, it was losing momentum, drifting lower and lower toward his hand. Then he heard it. Heavy breathing. Cold dread crept up his spine. He held his breath, lowered his gaze, and saw scarlet eyes, bloodthirsty, hungry, awake. Time froze. From a street corner, Thomas had just finished writing. He looked up and instantly spotted Zheng Qing and the demon. His stomach sank. He had no time. The spells in his law book were all devastating. Any of them would obliterate both the monster and Zheng Qing. He imagined the principal's furious roar, saw the pale, grieving faces of teachers. Regret stabbed through him. Then, a flicker of yellow. The talisman drifted down and landed gently on the demon's snout. The wild boar monster stared cross-eyed at it for a long moment. Then, slowly its breath began to ease. Its eyes closed, and it began to snore loudly. Zheng Qing collapsed backward onto the bluestone with a groan. "Thank the heavens," he muttered. "Best talisman I ever caught."
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
With a few muffled puffs, three figures shrouded in black robes abruptly appeared in the middle of the venue. Several law books, emitting all sorts of colors, floated in front of them. The books slightly spread open, the pages turning slowly in the faint light, the small and complicated runes rolling around from page to page. Zheng Qing could clearly feel the heavy pressure emanating between those pages, just like when Thomas had cast a spell before. "Who released Shi lay on the street. A furious voice came from beneath the hood of a chubby, short, black-robed figure. "Don't you know there are 2 alchemy workshops 300 meters away? Are you trying to blow up the Great Ming Pavilion?" Next to him, a tall, black-robed wizard silently touched his law book, causing 4 or 5 large vines to burst from the ground, firmly binding the snoring pig demon to the ground. The remaining 2 black-robed wizards turned their gaze to Zheng Qing. Scattered bystanders on the street were watching from a distance. Only Zheng Qing was sitting not far from the pig demon. Magic Association Investigation Bureau, the Rapid Response Team for Emergencies, Registered Wizard, Commissioner Andrew. The plump black-robed wizard nodded to Zheng Qing. "You were at the scene. Do you know who cast the Thunder Curse?" The chubby black-robed wizard was an Easterner, with a baby face, no beard, and long fuzz clearly visible at the corners of his mouth. There was a trident symbol on his robe. Zheng Qing obediently pointed towards the corner of the street. "Thomas." The plump, black-robed wizard turned his head for a glance and yelled, very surprised. "Weren't you an assistant at the school? How come you have time to wander in the Four Seasons Pavilion now?" "Bastard." Thomas's face dropped, his mouth twitched, and he replied fiercely, "I am only staying at school, not in jail. Why can't I come to the market?" He put away his brown law book, dusted off his robe, and quickly walked towards the group. "It seems like you haven't been at school these past few days," the chubby wizard said with deep meaning, shaking his head. Thomas frowned. Was it necessary to release a thunder curse just for a wild demon? A tall, black-robed wizard next to him interjected. And besides, why is there a piece of talisman paper pasted on this wild demon's forehead? Zheng Qing looked at the talisman paper pasted between the pig's nose and forehead and pondered. Turns out, pigs also have forehead space. We were previously in Osgard. Thomas walked forward, knelt in front of the pig demon that was tied up securely, examined it in detail, and then said, "This pig demon saw us and ran over directly." Only then did Zheng Qing understand the proper name of the light barrier that lit up the street moments ago. Osgard? Sounds like a protection spell invented by someone called Oster. You're suggesting that this wild demon can see through Osgard? The tall wizard shook his head, very confidently denying. This spell has been discussed multiple times in the Magic Alliance conference and can even block the vision of large demons. A mere wild demon should not have such ability. So I'm curious too. Thomas produced a bunch of bottles and jars from somewhere, a pair of earthy yellow leather gloves, and some tools like tweezers, bone saws, hammers, knives, and scissors. I plan to collect some samples and take them back to the lab at school. The Investigation Bureau commissioners looked at each other, nodding silently. Those are the gloves you got in your sophomore year, aren't they? Andrew took off his hat, revealing his baby face, and said, "What a romantic fool. I heard she got married earlier. Didn't you know? I just can't afford new gloves." Thomas's tone was very flat. He squatted on the ground, put on the gloves, and skillfully dissected the pig demon with the assorted tools by his side. Saliva, blood, brain matter, flesh, hair, tooth sockets, cartilage, hard bone, and other connective tissues he couldn't name were skillfully separated by him and put into different containers categorically. Zheng Qing looked at his focused yet relaxed demeanor and felt a little uneasy. He could be the fat guy from earlier. Zheng Qing whispered, "Shouldn't we notify his family? He isn't dead yet, is he?" All three wizards from the Magic Association Investigation Bureau looked at him in astonishment. Any wizard contaminated by a demon will degenerate into a real demon. There are no exceptions. Thomas clearly and ruthlessly said, "In the wizarding world, there's only one way to deal with demons." Zheng Qing wisely chose not to stupidly ask what that way was. Backing away a few steps from the dead pig, he frantically checked the exposed skin on his body to see if there was anything unclean on it. "New guy?" the tall wizard asked Thomas. "Freshman this year. Can't get any newer." Thomas bottled up his tools, stood up with a smile. "I just lit a small firecracker and scared him half to death." Zheng Qing forcefully resisted the urge to snort indignantly through his nose. "Don't be so casual about it. You just released a thunder curse. You almost blew the people in this street to smithereens." Andrew lamented in a tired voice, "Starry Academy is full of lunatics." Hearing this familiar comment, Zheng Qing couldn't help but chuckle. Andrew turned his head and gave him a look. Zheng Qing returned a friendly smile. "Thomas, the Bureau has a coordinated investigation mission. Do you want to lend a hand?" Andrew asked, looking back at Thomas. "No." Thomas refused straightforwardly. "If you accept, the Bureau could negotiate with the Great Ming Pavilion and not hold you accountable for your reckless spell casting." Andrew lowered his voice, softly tempting him. "No time," Thomas stated, frowning. "I have official duties. I need to write an 8,000-word interviewer report tonight. If you need my spellcasting report, I could write it as well." "Official duties?" Andrew glanced at Zheng Qing, stepped forward and slung an arm over his shoulder. "It's this year's freshman. He looks green. You can bring him along to broaden his horizons." "Young man, do you want to see what a great demon looks like?" Zheng Qing glanced at the wild pig sleeping on the ground and shook his head violently. The head wild demon had nearly consumed him, and from their conversation, it was clear that a great demon was an even more terrifying entity. Zheng Qing was just a student. His normal reaction when encountering demons should be to run. There was no logic in running towards a demon. "Which institute is he from?" Andrew released his grip, an exasperated look on his face as he turned towards Thomas. He doesn't display any of the energy typically seen in young people. "Juyo Academy." He came second in the overall rankings for this year's freshman. He's a publicly funded student. Thomas revealed a mocking smile. As I recall, aren't you also from Juyo Academy? What was your ranking when you first enrolled? Second or third from last? A top student, Andrew exclaimed loudly, reaching over to put his arm back around Zheng Qing's shoulders. We should take a picture together. It'll be worth a lot in the future. Zheng Qing straightened stiffly, his face burning with embarrassment. You're too shy, young man. Andrew turned to look at him, grinning. Speak your mind. Don't be so hesitant. Can I get reimbursed? Zheng Qing finally plucked up his courage, raising his voice. Earlier, when suppressing that pig demon, I used one of my calm heart talismans. Does your bureau reimburse for this? Because their badge bears a trident sword, they are also referred to as the trident sword by the wizards. As one of the three major composing bodies of the Wizard Alliance, the Wizard Council extends a great deal of preferential treatment to its own trident sword. For example, unlike ordinary civil law enforcement agencies and security departments, trident sword officers have global law enforcement authority and are exempted from responsibility for many high-risk magics. For instance, every year the Investigation Bureau has the priority right to select from graduates of the first university, proactive in recruiting high-potential promising talents, and enriches its own team. Or the fact that they can unapologetically discuss follow-up issues with Thomas while overlooking many losses from the Great Ming Pavilion. Perhaps the Great Ming Pavilion Committee knew this, so to save face, no staff from the committee came forward before these robed officials left. All right, Andrew, we should leave now. The tall wizard put away his law book, bidding farewell in a low voice. Nice to see you, Thomas. Thomas bowed slightly. The last slender, tall-robed wizard flipped through his law book. Dazzling runes sprung from the book as he twisted his wrist, burrowing into the ground. Andrew did not leave immediately. He discussed for a moment with his two colleagues, then took a parchment envelope and walked back to Thomas. Sounds of a deflating balloon came, and Zheng Qing looked in the direction of the sound, to see some thick tendrils slowly burying the pig demon underground. The tall wizard and the slender one waved at them, transformed into specks of starlight, and disappeared on the street. No need to search. They've already gone back to the bureau to report. Andrew handed the parchment envelope to Thomas and cheerfully said to Zheng Qing. Zheng Qing licked his lips, dry, with a hint of bitterness, like freshly shelled almonds. Whether it was Thomas's escape spell that led him to the Four Seasons Pavilion, Thomas's previously cast Thunder Curse spell, or the vines summoned by the Trident Sword wizards, who then turned into specks of starlight. Magic on that day made an intense impression on him. Why didn't you leave? Thomas gazed warily at the parchment envelope. He didn't reach out to receive it and said very seriously, I need to remind you, I am currently on formal business from the First University. Time is very precious. I wanted to ask you which team you bet on this season. Andrew's mouth corner fuzz trembled exaggeratedly, his round baby face full of sincerity. To be safe, I bet on the Venus team. The odds are just a bit low. A hunting team ranked so high and in such a stable state. How could the odds be high? Thomas relaxed, his expression eased. I bet on the Firebird team. Their new captain Dove Lang Ming is an excellent auxiliary hunter. Professor Ijazi was praising him to me not long ago, saying Dove Lang Ming performed excellently in his divination class. Zheng Qing fondled his law book on the side. He recalled, when they were chatting in the tea garden earlier, Thomas had mentioned these terms. He still didn't understand, but vaguely guessed that they were discussing the wizard sports events. School is still the best. At least you have someone to discuss the World Cup. Andrew held the parchment envelope in his hand, wagging his head. Not like in the bureau. Everyone is busy. No one is free to discuss the hunting race. Busy? Did they all go to Dark Blue Castle? A mocking smile surfaced on the corner of Thomas's mouth. Ever since he took over as the director of the Magic Investigation Bureau, the minor moves against the Under the Moon Council have increased. Zheng Qing had heard of the Under the Moon Council before. Thomas once told him that the Union of Wizards is the government of the wizard world, and the Under the Moon Council, the First University, and the Wizard Assembly are the three major organizations under the Union of Wizards. But why is the Magic Association Investigation Bureau targeting the Under the Moon Council? Zheng Qing felt a little confused. Did you see that news too? Andrew wore a bitter smile. He is Principal Shi's direct disciple. Naturally, he has inherited Principal Shi's hatred for the dark. If he wasn't so resolute in his position, he wouldn't be sitting in that seat as a registered wizard. The affair of the Dark Blue Castle is probably just the beginning. Zheng Qing had some recollection of Dark Blue Castle. The last time they were chatting in the tea garden, he remembered that Thomas's newspaper had mentioned this place, apparently due to an illegal experiment the court had sanctioned. But as for the other terms they mentioned, Zheng Qing was completely lost. He turned his head and stared listlessly at the old pagoda tree beside him. Between the tree branches, a furry head popped out. It was a tree elf. He had thought that these little spirits, who lived in the trees and were naturally timid, would hide in their tree holes for a long time after the previous thunderstorm. But as soon as the wild demon was taken away by the officials from the Trident Sword, these little guys popped out again. Zheng Qing took some hamster feed from his gray bag and placed it on his palm, making a tchtc sound, teasing these little spirits. Andrew glanced at him, moved closer to Thomas, and said softly, "But you guessed one thing wrong. The Bureau did not invest many resources in Dark Blue Castle. It was probably only a warning search. What's really giving them a headache now is other troubles." "Other troubles?" Andrew looked around, then mysteriously said, "Something disturbing happened in Silent Forest yesterday, and a newly transformed small demon managed to escape. The Bureau is currently searching everywhere, so manpower is a bit tight." "Disturbance?" Thomas became serious. "That old guy deep in the forest is causing trouble again." Andrew glanced again at Zheng Qing, making an inexplicit explanation. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I was wondering earlier, is it really necessary to dispatch the Magic Association Investigation Bureau's Rapid Response Team for just a wild demon? Is it really necessary to use the Thunder Curse for just a wild demon?" Andrew echoed. "The school's assistants have all been assigned to search tasks, and you'll definitely get this task when you go back. It's better to help us do a simple investigation than to waste a month in the Silent Forest." With that, he held out the parchment envelope to Thomas again. Thomas considered it and did not decline immediately. "There is still a vacancy in the Sue's residence area. You go have a look. The Bureau will issue a notice to the school. Your interview report can be submitted later. When you get back to the Bureau, I will submit a report on the use of Thunder Curse to the Four Seasons Pavilion, guaranteed." Andrew struck while the iron was hot, patting his chest to assure, "Those guys have indeed been acting more frequently lately." Thomas nodded, took the parchment envelope, and said, "I always have the feeling that they know something." "Do you know something?" Andrew raised his eyebrow and laughed, glancing at Zheng Qing. Zheng Qing, who was amusing the tree elves, stiffened his petting arm, thought furiously, "Whether I know anything or not is none of my business. Why are you always looking at me?" "This sound is like a fart." Zheng Qing resents his lost talisman paper. He thinks maliciously. The Trident Sword eventually stated that they were unable to compensate Zheng Qing for his lost Calm Heart talisman. According to Andrew's explanation, Zheng Qing used the talisman in self-defense, and it was not requisitioned by the Trident Sword. Therefore, theoretically, the Investigation Bureau is not responsible for compensating for such losses. However, before leaving, Andrew obtained Zheng Qing's identity materials from Thomas with the intention of applying for an honor certificate for Zheng Qing. "No matter what, you prevented the wild demon from causing further harm, and there will be some recognition within the Bureau for such acts." Before leaving, the chubby black-robed wizard slapped Zheng Qing on the shoulder with a bright smile. "Perhaps you could win a Merlin brass medal, or at least be rewarded with a Courageous Individual Award. This would greatly benefit your annual assessment." Zheng Qing was oblivious to these honors. He was only concerned about that talisman paper hanging on a pig's snout. "You're lucky, not getting hurt and witnessing such an exciting scene." Thomas watches Zheng Qing say goodbye to the tree elf, exclaiming, "Getting an honor certificate before even attending school. You won't get in trouble for casting that spell, would you?" Zheng Qing remembered the words of Trident Sword's committee members, feeling somewhat uneasy. I didn't really do anything. You were the real hero who stopped that demon. It would be so unfair if the school punished you for that. Who said I would be punished? Thomas raises an eyebrow, a playful smile in his eyes. All that's required is to file a report after using high-risk magic, because such magic often influences the temporal stability of the environment, necessitating further observation and repair by the relevant departments. Zheng Qing crams the rest of the mouse food in his hand into the paws of the tree elf. He stands up and sighs deeply. He feels somewhat disappointed. The magical world isn't as free as he imagined. Perhaps it's because Thomas had to file an accident report after casting a spell. Maybe it's due to various inexplicable institutions like the Wizards Alliance, various councils, Trident Sword, the Public Security Bureau, and the Management Committee. Zheng Qing felt like he had merely jumped from one circle into another. The circle may have become fancier, but in reality, it's still a circle. In his imagination, wizards should spend their years in long robes, guarding their laboratories, and have their domestic elves clean and manage the house. They would keep a three-headed dog for amusement, occasionally slaughter a fire dragon for a meal, pull out their wand to cast a spell when they see injustice, and casually curse those who offended them. If magic isn't a tool to manifest one's desire, then what's the point of magic? The reality of the magical world is no different from the outside. Zheng Qing grumbles discontentedly. I thought magic could be used freely. If you see someone you don't like, you just open your law book and turn him into a pig. Of course you can't. Thomas squints slightly, his green eyes sternly scanning Zheng Qing. Perhaps you should prepare a copy of the Wizard World Encyclopedia, the version published by the Education Committee Quality Education Office of the Wizard Alliance. It should be very useful for you. Arbitrarily using magic against another wizard is a serious provocation, punishable by a fine of 100 bronze coins to 10 gold beans. Those who act out particularly egregiously could be detained by the Public Security Bureau for 15 days. Zheng Qing sighs again. Thomas didn't take Zheng Qing far. After making 2 turns, they stopped in front of a huge wooden clock. The clock stood about 2 meters high. Its lines were simple, with no extra decoration. The deep maroon varnish made it look even more solemn and heavyweight. The clock face was white, with its Roman numerals reinforced with black brass rings. Unlike other mechanical clocks, there was no pendulum hanging beneath it, just a very thin thread holding a polished brass pendulum. No sooner had they stopped than the glossy brass pendulum began to swing, and at the same time, the clock drowned out in the melodious Westminster Abbey music. Zheng Qing was very familiar with this sound. There was an old walnut clock in his grandfather's study that chimes this music every hour. According to his grandfather, this chime was the bell of Big Ben in England, revered for its elegance and used in numerous clocks. Isn't that the music from our side? Zheng Qing exclaimed in surprise. This is the prayer music of the monks. The reason it is popular on your side is because the monks wanted to pray for more people. Thomas took out his cell phone-like device and checked it for a while before eventually nodding. It's time. Zheng Qing checked the clock and found it was precisely 5 in the afternoon. After a moment of thought, he took out his pocket watch and checked the time. It was accurate to the second. Good habit, Thomas nodded. For a wizard, there is nothing more important than time. Zheng Qing silently put away his pocket watch. The gentleman had said the same to him before. Thomas opened the glass door of the big clock and pushed Zheng Qing in, saying, "Go inside." "What's this?" Zheng Qing pushed aside the slim cord suspending the brass-faced pendulum and peered inside. The inside of the clock was very quiet, and the pendulum was not swinging. Wizards commonly refer to it as the big clock. Thomas squeezed into the clock behind Zheng Qing, casually closed the glass door behind him, and said in a muffled voice, "You can think of it as a rapid transport tool or an alchemy solidified escape. So, I can go home from inside this." Zheng Qing sort of understood. Thomas didn't say a word. He was squinting at the silver dial. "This is the 17 o'clock station," he murmured, taking out a brass key from behind the dial, inserting it into the Law tab slot at the bottom of the dial, and turning it twice. Zheng Qing heard a creaking sound from the clock, and then the ticking sound of the clock began. Reach out and see if there's a doorknob on the wall behind you. Thomas's voice trembled a little in the ticking of the clock. Zheng Qing groped in the dark and grabbed a round doorknob. Found it. His voice echoed loudly in the cramped clock. Turn it, open the door, and go out. Thomas hurriedly urged from behind. We only have 1 minute. If we don't leave quickly, the chimes of Westminster Abbey will deafen us. Upon opening the door, a dark corridor came into view. There seemed to be a faint light at the end. The air in the corridor was somewhat damp and turbid, but Zheng Qing found the smell very familiar. The sound of Thomas closing the door came from behind. Zheng Qing faintly heard the chime of Westminster Abbey ringing again. What did you mean by the 17 o'clock station? Zheng Qing didn't like this pitch-black environment. He tried to look towards the light ahead, making his voice sound less anxious. The big clock is a fixed station set up by the Wizard Alliance all over the world. There are 12 hours on the dial, 720 minutes, 1 station per minute, a total of 720 big clocks. We just passed through the station at exactly 17 o'clock. Sounds complicated, Zheng Qing murmured. After groping in the dark for a while, following the light source, turning a corner, Zheng Qing saw a familiar section of stairs. Were we just in the basement? He exclaimed in surprise. I didn't even know there was such a place in my house's basement. Your basement certainly does not have one. Thomas followed him to the stairwell. He patted the dust off his head, brushed off the cobwebs on his robes, and complained, Originally, I was going to go straight back to your bedroom, but all the doors in your house couldn't be opened, so I had to choose the basement. Zheng Qing blinked, remembering. In his spare time, he used to paste many talisman papers on the doors and windows, corners and walls of his house. Maybe these talisman papers interfered with the big clock's positioning. Now I'm going to the north. I may not have time to contact you in the near future. Thomas repeatedly instructed, remember to catch the flight from Chang'an Airport on August 31st. Remember, there's only one flight. If you miss it, you don't have to go. Don't expect the school to violate the 37 basic management measures for wizards for a freshman, nor expect the school to open the Guardian Array twice in a year. You haven't bought me that standard timer yet. Seeing Thomas's figure about to disappear, Zheng Qing suddenly remembered the book list and couldn't help but shout. The pocket watch you're wearing around your neck is quite good. Thomas's voice fades with his figure until it disappears. Zheng Qing sighed and pulled out the pocket watch around his neck. It was 17 minutes and 38 seconds past 4 in the afternoon. Against the deeply blue backdrop, only a large black bird spread out its vast wings, soaring between the open sea and the sky. The scorching sun hit the shimmering sea, resulting in a spectacle of captivating hues. The open sea stretched out endlessly to where the sky met its far horizon, devoid of any signs of intrusion or peculiarity, displaying just thick layers of blue. The gentle sea breeze moved across the surface of the water, teasing out a school of flying fish from underwater. They hit their large fins against the water surface in the direction of the sun. The disturbance startled these small creatures, not by some fierce ocean predator, but by a 3-masted boat that was approximately 100 meters long. A quiet black ship lay on the surface of the sea. The ship's body was jet black. The ebony hull appeared as if glazed, gleaming in the sunlight. The first 2 main masts bore 5 dim latitudinal sails, and the last mast held a large triangular longitudinal sail. All sails were unfurled, yet the black ship eerily remained in the same spot, unmoving. The surface of the sea within several miles remained undisturbed. A lantern was on the ship's stern deck, the flames weak and green. Yet even under such clear sky with the sun high above, the lantern radiated a brilliant light, enveloping the entire ship in its glow. Tightly tethered to the mast, jutting forward at an angle from the bow, were several thick ropes that ran through the entire ship, firmly bound to the large mast in its center. Under this forward angling mast of the ship's bow, a figurehead of a praying female demon had been placed. The female demon's gleaming crimson eyes shone dimly, her expression almost lifelike, her body as white as jade, contrasting starkly with the black ship. A piece of chiffon was the only coverage on her body, but a thick blood-red iron chain was coiled around her neck, arm, and body. Circling above her head were dozens of large, thin-skulled snakes, each arm-length in size. At this moment, these lovers of dark, cold caves lethargically drooped their bodies in the intense sunlight, hanging their tongues out from the spike-like mast at the ship's bow. Warm days always tended to make people feel lazy. This laziness would often lead to a sleepy atmosphere enveloping everyone. The deck was empty. No diligent crew members busily scrubbing the floorboards could be seen. Not even the ropes hanging from the mast deigned to sway. A canvas lounge chair was placed on top of the ship cabin. On the chair, a young man with black hair, wearing a pink polo shirt and variegated beach shorts, had a spread-out copy of Ladies in Flowers resting on his face. Faint snoring sounds came from underneath the magazine. On the main mast, right behind the sleeping young man, hung a burly bald man wearing only a pair of shorts, his head drooping motionlessly, showing no signs of life. He had spread out his arms wide, as if emulating Jesus on the cross, and his muscular body was covered in scars. Down on the left side of the ship railings, a tall, blond young man was leaning. He had a large cigar in his mouth and was soon still, his eyes fixed on the fishing rod in front of him. Maybe he was the only person awake on the deck. The black ship was desolately moored in this quiet sea. As far as the eye could see, there were only rolling waves. Apart from fishing, there was no other amusement available for this bored individual. But even this little bit of fun was slowly melting away under the intense sunlight. "Damn it," the blond young man cursed in irritation. His fishing pole hadn't seen any action since morning. The calm sea surface was like a slab of blue glass, not a ripple, disturbing its tranquility. Even the piece of intestine hung on the fishing hook failed to attract a greenhead fly. Have these wizards been conducting too many deadly experiments recently? So much so that even the flies despise their bloody flesh? The blond young man speculated maliciously, lifting his head out of boredom. Then he saw the black dot circling high in the sky. Damned feathered brute. The young man took a heavy puff of his cigar. All of this was the fault of that large bird. He lifted his eyelids, casting a glance at the black dot in the sky with his bloody eyes, and exhaled as smoke ring heavily. Ever since the captain had spotted a pair of wizards' eyes hanging above them, he ordered everyone to weigh the anchor and set the sails. So the black ship was stuck in this barren place, where only a bird relieved itself. At this time, everyone should have been on the white beaches of the Mediterranean, listening to the sirens sing their songs, slaughtering a couple of minotaurs raised by the Undermoon Council, singing praises to the beautiful moon. Who would have thought we'd ruin it all because of that large bird? Harry, the blond young man threw the half-smoked cigar into the sea, his eyes fixed on the lounge chair atop the ship's cabin, yelling angrily, "You didn't actually go egg collecting recently? That damned brute has been circling over our heads for 3 days now." The snoring under Ladies in Flowers paused. The young man in the pink polo blocked his ears, mumbled a few words, turned his body, showing his backside to the blond youth beside the ship railings, continuing to enjoy the relaxation under the sun. The blond youth squinted his eyes again. A hint of blood flashed in his eyes. A fierce grin tugged at the corner of his lips. 3 days of suppressed rage only needed a made-up reason to be ignited. Perhaps after a fight, both of them would be brutally beaten by the captain and then hung on the mast to dry in the wind. But if he didn't retaliate, he feared he would burn to ashes under the flames of anger simmering in his heart. The blond youth rubbed his palms together, conjuring a series of subtle popping sounds. His backside toward him, the young man in the pink polo had his muscles tensed. The snoring under Ladies in Flowers had disappeared without a trace. The scaled snakes, coiling on the angled mast at the bow, seemed to sense something, all straightening their necks, hissing at the blonde and the pink-clothed youth. The head of the burly man hung on the mast, gently swayed. For a moment, a strange silence fell over the deck. At that moment, a sound resembling a popped bubble came from bow of the ship, breaking the silence on the deck. A lithe figure appeared at the tip of the bow's inclined mast, twirling in sync with the sound. The sounds of high heels hitting the deck echoed rapidly. The figure walked in small running steps along the mast. As she ran past the bottom of the mast, the figure snorted coldly, stomped heavily, and the large scald snakes coiling on the mast, witnessing their companion get stomped in half, screamed in terror, scattering and retreating to the top of the female demon figurehead. Nikita, seems like your temper has gotten a lot worse over these years. The blonde youth watched the snake flesh fall into the sea. His tone was anything but pleasant. When did the people of the Witch King start throwing their weight around in the sea? The calm sea surface started churning. A school of white fish, like froth, drowned the piece of snake flesh. Before a drop of blood had a chance to seep out, the snake flesh dissolved into the foam that looked like it was made of snow. Tall and slim, she was completely wrapped in an oversized black robe, with only a hint of red lips and a segment of a white neck coaxing out from under her hood. She seemed to be carrying something on her back, propping up the robe and making the golden insignia on it particularly noticeable. The main part of the insignia was a golden character with two delicate skulls in the indented spaces on either side. Any demon with a bit of reputation would recognize this insignia. This was the insignia of the Witch King. Only the direct descendants of the Witch King were allowed to use this insignia. In the eyes of a wizard, all demons are the same kind of demon. Blood-red eyes, a heart of darkness. Just as in the eyes of a demon, all wizards are similar, their flesh emanating a fragrance, souls containing essence. But discrepancies are always there. Within the alliance of wizards, there exist indifferent wizard council and moonlight council. In the world of demons, the influences of several demon kings also distinctly segregate. The black ship was a subordinate of the sea demon king, and the female demon who just boarded the ship belonged to the Witch King. Harry, who was sunbathing and sleeping on a deck chair, had already tumbled into the cabin. His copy of Ladies and Flowers had already disappeared somewhere, and in its place was a clump of roses, vivid and dripping with color. "What can I do for you, charming lady?" He knelt in front of Nikita on one knee, his face bearing a cordial smile, his red eyes shining like rubies. If only he could clean the drool at the corner of his mouth, he would be perfect. "Put on your robe before you speak to me." The female demon held her head high, her tone filled with utter disdain. To a witch demon, the robe represented the most rudimentary respect. Neither the pink polo shirt nor the white and green striped beach pants could make the female demon feel Harry's sincerity. Such expressions are simply adorable. Harry clenched the rose in his hand, tightening his squeeze. Drops of ink green juice mixed with purple red seeped out from between his fingers. His red eyes reflected a yearning, like a mad artist seeing a rare treasure. "So adorable that I want to eat you up." Nikita paid no heed to Harry's delirious ramblings. She stepped lightly, bypassed the swooning man kneeling before her, and strided directly towards the cabin. "Hey, little fairy, how about learning some manners before educating others about respect?" The blond young man had somehow blocked the cabin's door, biting on an unlit cigarette, looking at her with a lazy gaze. A gust of wind from the sea blew, causing the female demon's robe to rustle, tightly encasing her exquisite figure. The object she was carrying on her back also revealed a clearer silhouette. It seemed to be a child. The blond young lad squinted his eyes. A witch demon carrying a child wanting to see the captain was too unusual in the world of demons. After all, for demons, the only advantage of a young one is its tender meat and smooth texture. He licked the corner of his mouth. The corner of the demon's robe stirred, revealing a dark red law book with a gold-threaded exterior. "I'm in a hurry." The female demon raised her head, revealing a pair of captivating eyes. Her dark red pupils sparkled with dangerous hues in the dazzling sunlight. The blond youth chewed the cigarette in his mouth, slowly savoring the golden tobacco. He did not respond, but his breaths grew longer. Above them, the tortured muscular man hanging on the main mast moved his head slightly, as if regaining some vitality. "We have plenty of time, gorgeous." Behind her, Harry's fawning voice rang again. "Besides, the little fellow on your back smells even better than you." The voice was close, as if right by the ear. The female demon did not look back. She heard a long, drawn-out inhalation sound circling right behind her neck, unending, as if it had no end. A chilling breath spread from behind her with the inhale, ready to swallow her at any moment. Which demon elders always said that the minions of the Sea Demon King were but a mob just emerged from bestiality, bloodthirsty, lacking reason. Now, Nikita felt that this summary was not complete. She thought there needed to be an addition. This mob was also a bunch of crude fellows who had no tolerance or patience for ladies. She knew that if she didn't give something up, she might find it difficult to enter the cabin just within reach. The little figure on her back shrank. She hesitated no longer. She comes from the black prison. Nikita gently stroked the child on her back, whispering these words. Cough, cough, cough. The blond young man seemed to be choked by his own chewed tobacco, clutching his chest, bending over, coughing frantically, not noticing his exposed waist under the bewitching gaze of the female demon. Thud! The muscular man hung up on the mast, struggling to break the ropes binding him, heavily crashing on the deck. The black ship dramatically rocked a few times, stirring ripples across the calm sea. The icy breath behind her disappeared tracelessly. Nikita could even clearly feel Harry holding his breath, blushingly distancing himself from her. A satisfied smile crept onto her lip corners. A female demon always knows when she can stun everyone. Come in. A gentle but slightly nasal voice came from the cabin. Pushing aside the blond young man who was bent over coughing insanely in front of her, Nikita lowered herself and crawled into the dark cabin. In the sky, the big bird that had been circling for a long time cried and suddenly flew away. Is it her? The muscular man touched his bald head, asking in a hoarse voice. The blond young man was still coughing. Harry squinted his eyes, watching the big bird go further and further until it became a dot, disappearing in the azure backdrop. He knew the muscular man was referring to Nikita. He also understood his meaning, questioning whether the big bird that had been monitoring the black ship for 3 days was looking for Nikita. This big bird is the wizard scout. The scout only shifts its gaze once it sees what it intends to see. For such matters, you can only ask the captain. Harry took out his ladies in flowers, using it as a fan, grinning at the muscular man with a slick tone. Coming down the downward-leaning stairs to the cabin, Nikita felt somewhat bewildered. Like the color of the ship, the cabin was pitch black. Its space seemed claustrophobic and couldn't hold many things. This was quite different from the spacious and luxurious hall she had imagined. Whether during the years when she was a wizard or the days of her decline into a demon, she scarcely saw such confined space. Wizards and demons with slightly superior abilities always had various ways to expand space and create a comfortable environment for themselves. She blinked, quickly adapting to the dim light in the cabin. Not far from where the staircase led was a thick wooden pillar, which, judging by its location, was likely the main mast of this black ship. Some wooden boxes were casually piled up under the pillar, and a wine barrel with iron hoops was rolled into the corner of the wall. The barrel lid was open, exposing the emptiness inside. The female demon's slender eyebrows furrowed. She could feel the child on her back shivering. She reached her hand out and gently patted. The ship's a bit old. Make do with it. A gentle voice came from the lower left. Nikita was only then startled to realize there was a small patch of light in this dark ship bottom. Right above the illumination was a piece of iron railing, through the gaps of which the brilliant sun shone into this dark cabin, creating a splash of variegated colors and rendering the shadows leaning against the left wall even darker. That gentle voice came exactly from that darkness. In their spare time, the old demons would engage in discussions about their experiences in cooking wizard flesh. The young demons needed to take care of their own wild demons, while the female demons loved to gather, gossiping about the great demons that roamed the seas. The name of the black ship is the Mist Ship, a warship personally constructed by the Sea Demon King. Its captain, a legend among powerful demons, was often the subject of chatter among the female demons. It was said that this captain was very young, a native breed demon, born a full-fledged true monster, and now, not even 100 years old, already standing at the very pinnacle of being a great demon. The rumors stated that he once commanded the Black Ship to travel the 4 seas in a single day, killing 13 wizard hunting teams, with all 3 of the team-leading mages meeting their end. According to the whispers, he once entered the depths of the sea on a full moon night, challenging the ancient sea demon king and emerging unscathed. There is even a legend that he had once stood face-to-face with the president of the top magic university. Now, this legend was standing right in front of Nikita. Nikita slightly narrowed her eyes, quietly looking at the tall figure with his back to her, who had stopped beside a pillar. "Don't be shy. Come closer so you can see clearly. Whatever I show you is what I allow you to see." A gentle voice continued to sound, seeming very tolerant. Nikita was taken aback for a moment before obediently stepping forward. The first rule of the demon clan is to remain respectful and awestruck in front of the powerful, obeying their will. There is a large, wide plank leaning against the ship wall, supported by some sloping pieces of wood underneath. The plank seemed stable. On one side of the table close to the wall, a few dark earthen pots were strewn about, with smoke of different colors swaying a few inches from the mouth of the pots. On the outer side, an ancient hide scroll lay unfolded, intricately decorated with gold and silver patterns. A wooden plate was casually placed on the hide scroll. The plate was of an ancient style, coated all over with dark purple lacquer. A few complex floral patterns were outlined with silver near the rim. Nikita thought these patterns seemed to have the style of magical symbols. Her eyes swept past the pots, the scroll, and the elaborate decorations, finally landing on the plate. And it was an intact, bloody brain, with 2 slender, dark spikes skillfully poking at the tiny folds on the brain. They occasionally tapped lightly, and under the trembling of the brain, a wisp of silvery white, foggy substance was coaxed out and sucked into a pair of greenish-black lips floating in midair. Nikita's gaze trembled a bit. After her gaze landed on those aqua lips and then swiftly slid down, she could only catch a glimpse of the corner of a white robe at the periphery of her vision. The magical symbols on this robe must be quite significant. She wondered to herself, memories, they are more fascinating than power. The gentle voice revealed strong satisfaction. Nikita knew he was talking about the silvery white vapor from just now. This was an extremely popular beverage among high-ranked demons, much like the wine that wizards love to drink. However, this beverage wasn't brewed from nectar and dew by the elves. This drink was filled with the noble and bloodthirsty scent of demons. It was made from a memory that flowed from warm, human brains stimulated by demonic energy. This drink was called memory. Memory was the vintage of time. To wizards, nothing was more important than time. Their power accumulated over time. Their souls were purified in time, and memories were the most precious essences left behind by the winds of time. These essences were the ultimate pleasure for high-ranking demons. This brain belongs to a little wizard we just captured yesterday. It's very fresh and very rare, especially those memories filled with struggles and power. They taste incredibly sweet. The gentle voice praised, with some reluctance. These days, the brains of wizards are becoming increasingly rare, especially those who have registered. It's such a pity. Nikita hastily pulled out a dark red pottery jar and respectfully handed it over. This is a memory I brewed using a Duoni person's brain. Although it doesn't have the rich taste of a wizard's memory, it is full of exotic flavor. I hope you will find it acceptable. The Duoni people were an alien species, acknowledging the legitimate position of the Wizard Alliance, and they scorned demons. Therefore, their flesh and souls were often treated as rare spoils of war, offered to the high-ranking demons. Don't be afraid. Lift your head. The captain of the mist ship took the pottery jar, stroked the raised patterns on it with joy in his voice. Nikita lifted her head to see those aqua-black lips, the tall nose above them, and the profound blood-red eyes. In just a moment, she got lost in those pure eyes, and her demon power uncontrollably stagnated. A barrage of memories, guarded by demonic energy in her mind, wildly surged forth. All the memories were repeatedly telling the same story. Survive. Born in the North District of Beta Town and the child of tricksters, Nikita knew from an early age the hardships of survival. When the children of wizards rode brooms and flew swords for fun around the town, she could only look on enviously. Then, she would once again follow her parents into the pitch-black silent forest to gather herbs, stealing a bit more time. When she was 6 years old, both her parents were gone. One was pulled to the bottom of the silent river by a water ghost during a crossing. The other was wound up to the treetops by gray vines while venturing into the silent forest. To her, the silent forest was then the embodiment of the god of death. As a child, her impression of living was the small piece of black bread given to her by a decrepit trickster in the streets. A small piece of black and exceedingly hard bread. The old trickster's withered hand pinching her face, watching her push the black bread into her stomach through her tears. Living was hard. At the age of 15, she received an acceptance letter from a top university. She moved into the university dormitory, no longer having to listen to rats fighting in a cramped attic. She got to eat delicious food, with no need to risk venturing into the silent forest for a piece of bread. She even had a boyfriend whose emerald green eyes were always clear and reliable. She began to fantasize about the future, about life. At university, she lived happily. In her senior year, on an internship assignment, once again, she stepped into the silent forest. She was attacked by a group of wild demons. By the time her mentor saved her, her eyes were already filled with blood. She told her mentor, "I want to survive." Her mentor said, "Then run far, far away. Run out of the silent forest. Run to a place where there are no wizards." And so she began to run. The wizards' hunting team was terrible, as they could always find solitary demons, either turning them into ash or tying them up and taking them to dark, unknown places. But what was more terrifying was that she could no longer restrain herself and started to see wizards as food. There was no turning back, but still she was alive. Not long ago, her mentor came to her with a 6 or 7-year-old girl. The girl also wanted to survive. She nodded her head, took the child back to the territory of the Demon King. The little girl, however, didn't transform. She remained stranded between being half wizard and half demon. The old demons in the territory were restless, wanting to take the child to the test bed. The young demons drooled at the prospect of tasting a little wizard. Even her own companions were casting predatory glances at them. And so, she took the little girl and once again ran away from the territory of the Demon King. To survive. Now, she has boarded this ship. The captain blinked. Nikita woke up as if from a dream. She fearfully touched her face. It was damp, with sweat and also with tears. The captain looked at her kindly, a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. Every fallen wizard has endured desperate struggles. The blood of those they consume is slowly pumped from a crying heart. The Black Prison was a prison established by Wizards for Demons, originally called the First Prison of the Wizards Alliance. This prison was hidden deep within the Silent Forest. Hundreds of demons were thrown into it each year, but never had one emerged alive. Such a prison was like a black hole, swallowing all information. Thus, it has been dubbed by the demons as the Black Prison. After the wizards found out about this, they outright changed the name of the prison to Black Prison as a means to deter the demons active outside. And now, a little creature who came from the Black Prison was standing inside the cabin of the ship. The captain of the mist ship rested his hand on his chin, grinning as he watched her. She was a 6 or 7-year-old girl with a lovely and adorable appearance. Her big, gleaming eyes were full of innocence as she looked happily at the towering captain, completely unaware of the terrifying demon before her. She came from the Black Prison? The captain glanced at the female demon as he asked. Yes. Nikita lowered her head in response. Everyone says it's a deep abyss. How did she climb out of it? The captain pinched the little girl's cheek, intrigued. Her mother is the jailer of the Black Prison. Why protect her? When I was still a wizard, her mother was my tutor. Nikita quickly answered, for she knew she had to convince the man before her. The sentences had been brewing in her heart for many days. She's been infiltrated by the original demon blood and will eventually transform. My tutor knew what would happen if she stayed in the university, so she entrusted me to take her away. I owe my tutor my life, so I have to protect her. What a joke. The captain of the mist ship shook his head. Nikita knew what he meant. To a demon, the idea of staying true to a promise made to food was indeed laughable. Perhaps deep down inside her, there was a sliver of unrealistic hope. Why not return to the wizard demon king's territory? The captain stood up, tossing his white cloak onto the armchair. I went back. Nikita answered with a bitter tone. But she is not transformed yet. The old wizard demons wanted her on the experimental table. The younger ones wanted to eat her, and even my partners had designs on her. Why come here? My tutor told me that the only way for her to survive is to board this ship. Didn't your tutor tell you about the rules for boarding? The captain's dark green lips curled upwards. Rules? The female demon looked at the captain in bewilderment. Isn't the captain's word the law? Even though I enjoy your flattery, I must inform you that the boarding rules were set by His Majesty, the Sea Demon King. The captain wagged his finger, pointing at the two prey before him, a bloodthirsty smile at the corner of his mouth. Each boarding person must bring their own sacrifice. Nikita's heart tightened immediately, her face pale as she looked at the captain. Sacrifice. Her voice was somewhat hoarse due to terror. A sacrifice is an offering used in a ritual. In their rituals, wizards typically use sandalwood and talismans, fine wines, and delicious food. More solemn rituals would present 3 offerings. For them, worship is mostly a ritual to remember ancestors and occasionally acts as a bridge between yin and yang. The ritual of demons is entirely different. Demons have a long history of tradition. Their ancestors believed that the world originated from a great true spirit, and every life is a blood relative of the true spirit. The true spirit governs the fate of all its offspring. Wizards are stealers of the true spirit's fire. They are rebels. The flesh and blood of a wizard are the best offerings to the true spirit. Before each of their feasts, demons carry out a simple ritual. After each ritual, they hold a grand feast because fresh blood is both an offering to the true spirit and a delicacy for the demons. So, I need to choose a suitable sacrifice from among you. The captain of the mist ship looked at them kindly. His dark red eyes didn't even flicker. First, your names. He snapped his fingers, and a green flame immediately erupted from the dark oil lamp on the table. An old elf with a pointed head, round ears, and white beard slowly emerged from the darkness, climbed onto the table shaking, and spread out a gray beast skin map. In the center of the drawing was a black scale, seemingly drawn with charcoal from embers, roughly cut, simplistic. Around the beast skin were dark red runes that emitted a faint red light in the dim cabin. Nikita's lips were trembling, her mind was blank. Sacrifice meant death. Since she was 6 years old and abandoned on the streets, this was the closest she had come to death. Jojo. The little girl next to her pursed her lips, reporting her name timidly. The old elf brutally grabbed her little hand, pricking her arm with his black fingernail. He dipped his finger in the flowing blood and wrote the words Jojo in the blank area on the left side of the scale. The character Zhou is derived from mouth and use. A long time ago, it represented the best human sacrifice. The captain was facing away from them, appreciating the splendid view outside through the narrow window in the cabin. Behind him, the little girl was silently sobbing with her arm clutched tight. The obsolete elf poked the dazed female demon next to him with his long fingers. Nikita, the demoness murmured. Her name was inscribed on the right side of the scale. The green flame on the oil lamp suddenly sprang up, shining on the weathered face of the old elf, adding an extra layer of gloom. Now, the two of you must say a passage of the sacrificial ceremony in front of His Majesty, the Sea Monster King's shrine. The old elf hoarsely pointed to a snippet of something on the table, pitch black, resembling a tree stump. The sacrificial ceremony is the scripture that must be chanted before a demon banquet or ritual. It is said to be the true spirit admonishments recorded by the ancient demon king. Demons who disobey this commandment will lose the blessings of the true spirit. Nikita was very familiar with these prayers. The aged elf chanted a line in its peculiar tone, while Nikita and Zhou followed suit. Serving with a large scoop, praying for the yellow go high back, for hope and expectation. Longevity is a blessing, to bless the scenery blessings. Alas, adhere to the sacrificial ceremony. The entire scripture was less than 300 words long, and it was fully chanted within 5 minutes. The dark red runes on the gray beast skin map bloomed with dazzling red light, reflecting the silhouettes of everyone in the cabin on the walls in a menacing and distorted way. In the red light, Zhou tightly clutched Nikita's robes. Nikita, arms wrapped around herself, was sitting on the floor with her head deeply buried between her knees. Breaking into the silent forest in order to survive. Escaping from the silent forest in order to survive. Invading the territory of the witch demon king in order to survive. Escaping from the territory of the witch demon king in order to survive. Having struggled for so long, is it finally coming to an end? On the gray beast skin map, the scale unsteadily wavered back and forth. The old elf, in panic, sought advice from the captain, but the captain only grabbed his ear and threw him into the sea from the window. Choose one among yourselves. The captain wiped his hand with a clean handkerchief before throwing it out of the window. On the table, the green oil lamp flickered a couple of times before finally extinguishing. Light blue smoke gradually filled the cramped cabin. If we can't live together, let's die together. Zhou whispered into her ear, I haven't changed. I can't eat humans. The demoness raised her head and glanced at the young witch. Zhou was gritting her teeth, her eyes sparkling brightly. Her brief memories of these moments emerged in a flood. Sister, this uncle is so ugly. In the territory of the witch demon king, the young witch pointed at Nikita's witch demon teacher, whispering in her ear, When I grow up, I'll catch you a bunch of young wizards. Eat one, throw one. Standing in front of the bonfire, the little witch swung her tiny hands, all while maintaining a haughty attitude. Sister, when you're hungry, you could take a bite of your finger and you won't feel hungry anymore. During their escape, when she hadn't had anything to drink, the little witch tried to comfort her. The demoness burst into tears. What a fascinating smell. The captain of the mist ship turned his head, looking into the cabin. He took a deep breath, his expression enraptured and his tone increasingly warm. Exuding fear and desperation, still trying to struggle. Even if it's just a glimmer of light, she refuses to let go. Perhaps your teacher knew you could still see a glimmer of light, so he sent you here. Nikita felt bone-chilling coldness. Now you can let go. Tears streamed down Nikita's face. She knew she was about to fall into the darkest abyss. The captain looked at her kindly, watching as Nikita choked, chewing, watching as a thin strand of blood trickled down the corner of her mouth, watching as they merged as one in their despair. The taste of the blood at the corner of her lips was sweet and warm, but Nikita's stomach started to turn cold. This coldness would soon spread throughout her body and would persist. Nikita vaguely remembers the first time she tore open a wizard's throat. At that time, she was wandering at the end of the Nile River, with the scorching sun baking the earth mercilessly. The sand beneath her feet felt like a swamp, pulling her forcefully into the dark depths. A young wizard had been tailing her for over a month. Hunters always have endless patience with their prey. He would watch her from afar as she stumbled and staggered through the desert. She hadn't eaten anything in a week. The demon blood transformed her completely, from her body to her psyche. The food of wizards or humans, when eaten, would be violently rejected. Only blood could be accepted by a demon's body. While animal flesh could stave off hunger, the more she ate, the stronger the sensation of starvation. Every upright being seemed like a moving candy, giving off a tempting sweet scent. She resisted this desire, so she fled deep into the desert. Except for the ugly insects, there was not a single human in sight, except for the wizard who was following her from a distance. Lying on her back in the scorching sand, Nikita looked at the endless blue sky, unfocused. The insects of the desert were extraordinarily resilient, their robust exoskeletons concealing sulfuric bodily fluids. These fluids burned her tender lips and irritated her mouth and tongue. But what truly ravaged her was the young wizard's loud curses. She knew this was a common tactic among hunters. Wizards corrupted by demons would become mentally fragile, easily driven to madness and irrational behavior under stimulation. When she was at the First University, she was among the best of them. The young wizard was not far away. Nikita turned her head, looking at him with slightly reddened eyes. Such a handsome young man. A sense of bewilderment washed over her. If they were still in the academy, such attention from her would have made him blush and become flustered. But now, the young man would only warily watch her, open his law book, ready to throw a thunder curse at her head at any moment. There was no going back. She looked back at the sky and closed her eyes. From nearby came the young man's short screams, accompanied by the heavy thud of a body hitting the ground. Nikita struggled to sit up. Beside the sand dune, an old man wrapped in a black, broad robe was looking at her with crimson eyes. "He's dead." The old man's voice was dry and hoarse, like a chilly wind blowing through a dry forest. He raised his slender cane from under his robe, pointing at the body lying in front of him. Nikita hesitated for a moment, then rolled over to the young wizard's side and touched his neck. The pulse had indeed disappeared. The old man kindly stroked her head, as if petting a puppy. He lifted the iron spike-like cane in his hand and pierced the dead wizard's neck. Blood seeped out softly from the black hole, emitting an enticing aroma, just like the black bread she used to receive from the old trickster. Nikita bowed her head and began to suck. Then she sobbed, tore open his throat, and began to drink deeply. After that, she had a new teacher. He was a staff member of the witch Demon King, and the old man asked her to call him the Duke Ulrich. The Duke led her out of the Sahara and back to the Demon King's territory. Days passed, and Nikita had seemingly become accustomed to the life of a witch demon. However, in the eyes of other demons, she became a disgrace to teacher Ulixi, because she only ate dead wizards. "Take your time, don't rush. Everyone started like this." The old Duke would always comfort her like this. Not until Zhou came to the Demon King's land. Faced with the hostile demon companions, Nikita discovered that she still couldn't face a wizard's death directly. So, she fled once again with the little witch. Now, aboard the mist ship, with nowhere left to run, Nikita felt an unexpected sense of relief. Perhaps that was what teacher Ulysses truly intended. A demon that has fallen into darkness can only survive by drifting deeper. Memories flicker just for a moment, yet they remain etched in the heart as if eternal. Nikita knelt at the captain's feet, expressionless, her red eyes sparkling brightly in the dark. "Please let me stay on the ship." The captain of the mist ship sat quietly behind the table. In front of him was the wooden bowl that once held memories. The bowl contained the little witch's brain, looking like a succulent peach, the white flesh smeared with pink juice. The captain's black stinger rapidly probed the folds of the brain. Strands of violet fog, snake-like, slipped into his nostrils. After a while, the succulent peach slowly lost its shine, revealing its grayish core. "Although you've offered a sacrifice and boarded my ship, that doesn't imply you can stay on board." The captain's gentle voice drifted lazily. "So, you need to give me a compelling reason." Nikita stayed silent for a few seconds. "I want to live," she said, gritting her teeth. "Huh." The captain's lips curved, glancing with keen interest at the witch in front of him, a mysterious sparkle in his dark red eyes. "That's a good reason, but it's just not enough. I can infiltrate the premier university's voyage," Nikita claimed with unusual calm. This was the secret shared only between her and the boy with emerald eyes. When she revealed this secret, her past self was completely severed. Indeed, completely severed. The past Nikita had just perished. The one standing here now was Nikita Zhou. The captain toyed with the black stinger, staring absently out the window. The setting sun's afterglow painted a layer of tempting jam onto the ocean, The dark blue sky looked like a huge tablecloth covering this massive cake. Many intriguing details had flowed out of the little witch's memory. Deep in the distant silent forest, in the black hole-like prison, an ancient tree had sprouted new buds. This was a massive incident, but the premier university merely appointed a dean to guard the black prison. In the captain's memory, at least a vice-chancellor-level high-ranking mage from the premier university would be assigned to guard the tree when it bloomed. This implied that some interesting changes have taken place in the premier university. The captain lifted his head, looking gently at Nikita. If you can get on that voyage, then by all means go ahead. Nikita slowly nodded. If there's nothing else, go help upstairs. Tell them we're heading north. Nikita did not leave immediately. The captain silently watched her. I want her. Nikita stared at the shriveled peach in the wooden bowl on the table. This was the last relic of the little witch Zhou left in this world. What a strange request. The captain agreed, shaking his head. Clasping the withered brain, Nikita bowed her head gently, quickly leaving this dark world behind. On the deck, Harry, dressed in beach shorts, was gathering the sails. The blond youth was helping him pull the ropes, while the burly man had once again hoisted himself on a mast. The captain said we're heading north. The female demon yelled at the two busy men. I see it. Harry pointed to the green lantern at the stern of the ship. Nikita remembered when she boarded the ship. The lantern was flashing with blinding light. Now the light had gone out. Did the captain let you send a message, agreeing to let you board? The blond youth was pulling a thick rope, swinging in front of the female demon. His blood-red eyes narrowed, his tone threatening. Nikita cautiously watched him, saying nothing. My name is Ryan, and I am the bosun on this ship. The blond youth pointed to his nose and threatened. Since you're on the ship, you have to follow my commands. You're the bosun? Then I'm the deputy captain. Harry, standing on the mast above his head, called out angrily. Who's seen a bosun who can't even fish? Besides, the lady doesn't need to take orders from anyone. Turning his head, Harry's face was filled with a joyful expression, diligently moving his own lounge chair for the female demon. All the lady needs to do is lie here and enjoy the view. Ryan snorted in mockery, pulling a copy of Ladies and Flowers from Harry's pocket behind him, and laughed sarcastically. Nikita did not sit down. Looking at the two figures in front of her, she suddenly lost a bit of faith in the legendary dark ship. How many crew members are aboard? She interrupts the two men, who were in a fierce dispute, to ask. Including these two stinky brats, there are a total of 113 crew members above the true monster level, excluding deep-sea war beasts, elven servants, alchemy puppets, and disposable wild demon army. From behind her, a gloomy voice roughly answered. Nikita got a shock. Turning quickly, she saw a one-legged, lame old man holding an extinguished, deadly wind lamp, standing behind her. At least a powerful demon could appear behind her without making a sound. Nikita bowed her head respectfully. Harry, have you finished gathering the sails? And Ryan, if there are any more ropes complaining to me that you're swinging them around, I will hang you upside down under Arno's bottom. The one-legged old man pointed to the muscular man hanging on the mast, barking harshly at the blonde youth. Nikita saw several gray ropes coiled around the old man's neck, swinging their ends listlessly. Without saying a word, Harry and Ryan vanished from the old man's sight. As for you, pretty little thing, what do you think you're capable of? The old man turned his face, revealing two black, hollow eye sockets. 2 points of red light twinkled in his eye sockets, sizing up the female demon in front of him. I can cook, Nikita quickly replied. Then go. The ship could use a cook. The old man grunted, stomped his foot, and vanished from the deck. The witch opened her Kuan bag and checked her inventory, letting out a sigh. She looked up. Harry was standing at the top of the cross mast, gazing into the distance. His pink shirt under the afterglow of the setting sun looked like a melting candle, somewhat blurred and distorted. The blonde Ryan was by the side of the ship's railing, directing the neat coiling of several ropes into the dry cabin. Next to him, a few lean, wide-eyed elves were dragging wooden brushes and water basins, vigorously scrubbing the floor. "Where is the kitchen?" the witch shouted at Ryan. "In the cabin. You can find it by following the scent of blood." "Why is he always hanging there?" The witch pointed to the sturdy man hanging on the mast. "Does he need to be cooked for?" "You don't have to cook for him." Ryan chewed on his cigarette. Without even turning his head, "He is being punished and, according to the rules of the ship, must hang for a full month. He was due to be let down after sunset today, but since he broke the rules when you just came, he now needs to hang for another week." "What are we going to the north side for?" The witch felt that there were questions lingering in her heart. "If you respectfully call me your predecessor, I will consider telling you in charity." Ryan finally turned around, looking angrily at the witch. "The crew members before you all started by scrubbing the floor, but you can go directly to the kitchen. I thought relationships among demons would be simpler and more equal." The witch tilted her head, eyed this bizarre young man, blinked, and finally went into the cabin to find the kitchen. For wild demons, blood food was an unparalleled delicacy. Without the stimulation of blood in the food, it would taste just as bland as human food without salt. For higher demons, the requirements would naturally be higher. Nikita's claim of being good at cooking wasn't just a casual remark. During her naive childhood years, she knew how to simply process the food she obtained from the Silent Forest. From the first day that she was taken in by her teacher, when Sir Ulysses discovered her outstanding talent, she had been in charge of feeding her teacher, as well as a bunch of elder and younger brothers and sisters ranging from wild demons to large demons. So, she could easily pull out the prized vintage her teacher had stored from her Kuan bag, and she could also find a bunch of suitable condiments in it. Since it was for afternoon tea, there obviously wouldn't be much food. The witch prepared it in just a short while. Each person had a piece of a small snack and a drink. The snack was a piece of hind leg meat drenched with a layer of yellow soup. The meat was somewhat smoked and black. One couldn't see what material it was. Underneath, it was a thin layer of red jelly stuff resting on a wooden tray. The drink looked quite appetizing, dyed green, appearing very similar to the green bee that the wizards drank. All demon food was blood food. As a witch who retained a lot of aesthetic abilities, Nikita couldn't stand the coarse aesthetics of the demons. Regrettably, in the kitchen of the missed ship, she found out in desperation that all the available kitchen utensils consisted of only one knife, one cutting board, and one pot. "We need to stock up on some more ingredients, as well as suitable kitchen utensils." When delivering the afternoon tea to the captain's room, Nikita suggested. The captain curled his lip, but didn't object. On the deck, 2 hard-working sailors had prepared for departure. The anchor sunk deep into the sea had been lifted, and the sails on the mast had been taken down, rolled up neatly, and hung there. "You've done a good job, but you got the servings wrong." The old, one-legged shipwright squinted his pitch-black eyes and nodded. Nikita frowned and counted her snacks again. 113 servings, there was no mistake. She looked up with a bewildered look at the old shipwright. "There are indeed 113 registered senior crew members on the ship, but that doesn't mean they're all on the ship now." Harry stuffed his mouth full of snacks and explained with a muffled voice, "Most of them have gone to the New World. There are only 6 people on the ship now. The captain, the old shipwright, boxer-wearing Harry, blonde-haired youth Ryan, sturdy Arno, and herself." Nikita held her somewhat dizzy head, and in her heart the legendary ship that had traveled across the 4 seas had completely sunk. Despite the fact that their bloody lifestyle severely inhibited their capacity for artistic creativity, almost all demons are fanatics of art. Many of the greatest demons were connoisseurs of high caliber, while a very small number managed to evolve into outstanding artists. The reason Nikita's culinary skills were so well received by the Duke Ulrich lay in the artistic flair they began to exude. It was one of the reasons that she managed to survive within the territory of the Witch Demon King. "Aren't we about to sail? Why are we taking down the sails?" the siren asked, full of satisfaction as she gazed upon her gang of admirers, praising her dishes tirelessly. Nobody posed her any problems this time. "We're taking down the sails so we can sail on. With the sails fully spread, we would be in parking mode." Ryan gulped down a large mouthful of the green liquid and remarked, "Our demon ships, of course, cannot operate like those foolish mortals. Nikita found this method even more ridiculous, so she wisely changed the subject. The captain said we're going north. Do you know where? Towards the North Sea, Ryan answered concisely. To a wizard, the North Sea is a broad term, encompassing the entirety of the Arctic Ocean. However, in demonic parlance, only one place could be referred to as the North Sea. That is the territory of the iceberg demon. Why are we going there? The siren furrowed her delicate brows. If the sea demons on the mist ship were merely a little rough around the edges, then the hordes of demons on the iceberg were outright savages. The witch demons gossiped that the legendary iceberg demon went mad during his evolution, leading to his complicated mental state. As a result, every demon under him followed suit and went dumb as well. That question should be directed at you. Ryan glanced at the siren. A lady does not need to answer any questions from a brute. Harry's voice was muffled, his mouth still stuffed full of snacks. Billion stomachs, they may as well be called, as both high-spirited young guys managed to fit enough gourmet food for 100 men into their stomachs alone. Nikita noticed a few splotches of sauce on Harry's pink polo shirt. Originally, our next stop was the Black Triangle, but then you showed up and the boss changed his mind. Ryan put down his cutlery, pulling a faces as he looked at Nikita. My ticket reservations for the Siren concert next month are now useless, and I can no longer taste the Minotaur hooves cooked with Havana Chef special sauce. What on earth did you say to the captain? He pulled a green pelt from his pocket, shaking it violently before the siren. Nikita saw a few sirens lying leisurely on the rocks, writhing on the pelt, each with a jade coin resembling a full moon above their heads, surrounded by 3 or 4 gold beans. 1 jade coin for gold beans. Ryan slapped the concert ticket made of animal hide onto the table with a loud bang. The north is far away. How long will it take to get there? Ignoring the blonde youngster's complaint, Nikita took a sip of the green drink and posed a new question. Harry's mouth was still stuffed with food as he glanced towards Ryan. What's the name of our ship? Ryan gathered up his concert ticket with a bored look and asked in return. Miss Ship, look around. What do you see? Nikita looked around, a little taken aback. The sun was still burning in the sky, but a layer of hazy fog had unintentionally encircled them from all sides. The fog grew thicker, and within a few minutes, had limited visibility to merely 3 to 5 meters. Silence. The old bosun's gruff growl echoed in everyone's ears. As each moment passed, the dense fog showed no signs of dissipating, and all Nikita could hear was the sound of flowing water and some unsettling growls coming from within the mist. Little by little, a feeling of chill began to seep in from all directions. The siren lifted her head, staring quietly at the foggy sky and sea, unsure of where the chill was coming from. As the chill grew stronger, the fog began to thin out, and the fading embers of the setting sun could be seen through a thick veil falling onto the deck. Nikita blinked her eyes and shook her head. Her crimson eyes widened in shock as she looked up at the sky. There, stretching across the space above them, was a brilliant river of stars. The siren sprang to her feet and ran to the side of the ship. A little away from the mist ship, a pristine white iceberg was slowly sliding across her view. Atop the iceberg, a lazy polar bear was patting its belly, lying on top of the mountain of ice, staring unabashedly at the imposing black ship that had suddenly appeared before it. The mist ship had traversed thousands of miles across the wide ocean and arrived at the North Sea. As if flying over the boundless sea, a phrase crossed the siren's mind. You're just asking how long it would take to get to the north, right? Harry sidled up to her with a cheeky grin on his face, holding up his pocket watch with an air of seriousness. After careful calculation, it'll take approximately 5 minutes and 37 seconds. Yes, there's about a 5 minutes and 36 seconds margin of error. Margin of error? Although Nikita was quite inclined to kick him, she was more curious about that error. It's the time it takes for us to go in and out of the fog. The witch didn't speak, only expressing her inner excitement through her trembling breaths. Watching the performance of this new crew member with satisfaction, Ryan consoled her. Don't get too excited. This is just a minor incident. Stay on the ship longer, and then you'll see true miracles. I'm not excited, it's just so cold. The witch's teeth were chattering as she spoke. Harry scampered into the cabin and came back with a brand-new white lambskin cloak, draping it over the witch. The witch gave him an oblique glance and said nothing. "That's my new coat," Ryan roared, getting into a scuffle with Harry. Off in the distance, on an iceberg, a large white bear clutched a big fish with its teeth, standing upright. Cormorant, its small red eyes filled with curiosity, gazed at the spectacle on the deck. Nikita paid no attention to the fighting duo. Her gaze was drawn to the nearby sea. Compared to the warm water area they had been in before, the North Sea's water was of a deeper hue. The teal waters shimmered with glints of light, big and small icebergs floating on it. Compared to the iceberg, these chunks of ice were fragile, chillingly cold, with only a few fatigued seals lounging on them, wagging their tails. Not far from the mist ship, ripples surfaced on the calm sea. The resting seals lifted their heads alertly, staring at the sea's ripples, their tails uneasily slapping the ice blocks underneath them. In less than a minute, a massive whirlpool appeared before Nikita's eyes. The deep center of the whirlpool was like the legendary sea vortex, unfathomably deep. The seals screamed, plunging off the ice blocks like dumplings, desperate to swim away from the whirlpool. But it was too late. A giant, gray ship, covered in seaweed and shells, vomiting sea water, emerged from the deep vortex. The seals caught in the whirlpool slammed into the seaweed and shells, leaving behind patches of dark red scars. Nikita turned to the two young sea demons who had stopped their fight. "That's the whirlpool ship, another large ship comparable to ours," Harry explained to Nikita with a smug face. "I reckon the boss wants to meet the old guy on the whirlpool ship this time." Not only him. Ryan's somewhat surprised voice came from behind them. Turning around, following Ryan's somewhat stiff gaze, Nikita saw a hazy image. It was like a mirage described by the folks. In this mirage, a plump five-mast ship was moored peacefully in a picturesque harbor. Nikita could even see a drunken sailor being stripped of valuable belongings by several thugs and left on the ground on the nearby dock. "This mirage is too clear. It looks so real," she couldn't help but exclaim. "Because it is real." Harry's voice was less slick than before and seemed somewhat heavy. Nikita looked at him in surprise, only to see Harry staring solemnly at the mirage. "That's Poseidon's ship, a giant floor ship that dominates the eastern seas," Ryan softly explained from the side. Nikita looked enlightened, then stunned. Mist ship, whirlpool ship, Poseidon ship, and then the stable iceberg. Harry counted on his fingers, pondering, "We are in big trouble." Iceberg. Nikita dizzily spun around, looking at the nearby iceberg. That indeed was an iceberg, a true iceberg. The polar bear on it seemed somewhat dissatisfied with the successive intruders and let out an angry roar. At first, I also thought it was an iceberg, but seeing the legendary demon ships popping out one after another, I can't help but recall the tales from the north. "What exactly did you say to the boss?" Harry looked seriously at Nikita. The young witch looked bewildered. It lurked in the deepest parts of the ocean year-round, silently dozing off, sometimes sleeping for hundreds of years at a stretch. It had become a legend, an epic, rather than a reality for the wizards. The deepest impression that the Sea Demon King had left on the wizards was accounting to its four big sea demons. Mist, Whirlpool, Iceberg, Poseidon. The Sea Demon King extracted its own ribs as dragon bones, constructing formidable warships for its four trusted subordinates that traverse the four seas. Mist ship, Whirlpool ship, Iceberg ship, and Poseidon ship. The four big sea demons reigned respective marine territories in the east, west, south, and north. Even the alliance of wizards was powerless against them. "Nikita, come with me to meet a few old friends." The captain of the mist ship somehow came out of his cabin and reached the deck. The young female demon was trembling with excitement. In the world of demons, living legends were few and far between. These captains were undoubtedly the most dazzling amongst them. Each had battled at least one powerful wizard, with countless destroyed hunting teams. Previously, she had only heard these stories from the Duke Ulrich, but now she would face these legends directly. The female demon tightened her fine woolen cloak around her. A solemn feeling of witnessing history washed over her. Under the sunlight, four large ships each held a position, facing the boundless sea in silence. A towering iceberg stood in the north. The east was enveloped in a mirage. The south was shrouded in mist. Only the worn-out whirlpool ship in the west, covered with seaweed and shells, quietly stopped under the sun. The captain of the mist ship was draped in a white cloak with a wide hood. He hid most of his face within the hood. A lantern emblem of the mist ship was embroidered on the back of his cloak, shimmering a dazzling green under the sunlight. Nikita followed behind him, treading cautiously on the sea surface, fearful that causing too much ripple might upset the towering figure before her. It is difficult to eliminate the effects of an event, but it is possible to minimize a huge issue. The captain of the mist ship's deep voice sounded warm and gentle on the vast sea surface. Just like your footprints, every step you take on the sea ripples outwards. This is the influence you bring. Although using some abilities can easily eradicate these ripples, just like our current position, on this vast sea, any unauthorized use of abilities is prohibited and could bring unpredictable consequences. Nikita looked around nervously and confusingly. She felt that the captain was implying something, but all she could see was the four silent large ships. Each ship had a single figure walking towards the center of this marine region. On the iceberg, a giant white bear shook its head, moving forward slowly. From the mirage, a burly man with a triangular hat and a thick beard emerged. The captain of the whirlpool ship appeared a bit unkempt, with his ragged armor covered in seaweed and shells. But regardless of their appearances, each captain emanated an intimidating aura. Nikita began to understand the captain's implication. For demons, the moral binds of a wizard's creed did not exist. Their actions were bound only by balance and power. Now, this marine region had four ships, for captains, forming a fragile equilibrium. To eradicate the ripples under your feet without drawing others' attention, you must create more ripples. Hide the less noticeable ripples below your feet within them. The truth is hidden right there. The captain of the mist ship sighed, suddenly lifting his hood, revealing a pale face. He let out a hearty laugh, stepping on the sea surface, and charged towards the other three captains. At the same time, the other three captains also stepped on the sea surface, rushing forward. An intense impact erupted ahead. The raging currents were like runaway horses, pulling at Nikita's cloak with a loud noise. The streets of Four Seasons Pavilion were paved with long, glistening bluestone slabs, neat, ancient, and steeped in history. In peaceful times, the street would be bustling with tourists. Mischievous tree elves often swung from the weeping willows lining the road, leaping from head to head and occasionally dropping twig-crafted trinkets on unsuspecting passersby. But not today. Today, the elves had vanished into their tree holes, trembling as the ground quaked and the trees shivered from the deafening drumming that echoed through the street. The cause? A wild boar demon. It tore through the road, its stubby hooves pounding against stone in a clattering rhythm like rain on broad banana leaves, or a pig skidding across porcelain. 3 glowing runes, summoned from Thomas's floating law book, drifted into the air and dissolved into threads of invisible breath, merging with the surrounding wind. The tree elves pressed themselves deeper into their bark-lined shelters. Something ominous was building in the air. Zheng Qing's eyes widened. The atmosphere felt angry, electric, buzzing with invisible needles that pricked the skin with every breath. Thomas stood firm before him, exhaling deeply. A low, reverberating rumble began to swell, distant and vast, as though thunder had started crawling across the horizon. Then Thomas glanced back with a devilish grin. "Cover your ears," he yelled. Zheng Qing's mouth moved, but no sound came out. He clamped his hands over his ears just as the sky seemed to explode. The thunder wasn't a clap. It was a barrage. It roared like bursting fireworks, echoing endlessly, engulfing every other sound in its wrath. The air screamed. Even with his ears covered, Zheng Qing felt the vibration rattle through his bones. The world shook. Then came the lightning. It cracked down onto the wild boar monster like a hammer from the gods. The boar shrieked, its tusks slicing through the edge of the barrier as the blast engulfed it. Flesh tore from its hide in bloodied chunks, scattering across the bluestone in a grisly trail. The scent of ozone mingled with the sharp tang of roasted meat. Zheng Qing gagged. The storm faded as quickly as it came. The air, once furious, returned to its usual warm stillness. The tree elves slowly unfurled themselves in their hollows, but none dared emerge. Zheng Qing wiped his face, took a breath, and looked at the smoking remains of the demon. "Is it dead?" he shouted. His ears still rang, so he had to raise his voice just to hear himself. Thomas shouted back, "Probably just unconscious. A massage of this level won't kill it." "A massage!" Zheng Qing yelled, exasperated. "That spell nearly exploded on top of us. You'd lose points for that kind of insult at Starry Sky Academy." Thomas bellowed with a laugh. Zheng Qing scowled. He'd just had his first real taste of the Academy's chaotic brand of magic, and it only confirmed one thing. He was glad he didn't enter that dream exam room. Just hours earlier, Thomas had seemed serious and dependable. But after summoning a full-on divine lightning storm, that image was completely shattered. "You want to go check if it's still breathing?" Thomas asked. "I'll wait until my calm heart talismans fall," Zheng Qing said, tilting his head upward. When the thunder hit, he'd panicked and lost grip of his talismans. A few were scorched to ash mid-air, but 2 had survived, now gently spiraling down on warm air currents. He decided to wait. Ever since learning he was a broke wizard, Zheng Qing had become extremely careful about preserving anything even remotely valuable. At Cloud Think Boutique, he overheard students mentioning a flea market at the academy where one could trade talismans, potions, and spell components for supplies. That little rumor sparked something in him. He had a stash of talismans under his bed. Maybe they'd be worth something. Leaping up, he snatched the lower of the 2 talismans from the air and stuffed it into his gray satchel. The second talisman, disturbed by the air current, drifted further away. Catching his breath, Zheng Qing followed it deeper into the street. Behind him, Thomas was scribbling in his law book with a quill, glancing up just long enough to caution, "Don't go too far. Once I'm done transcribing this spell, we're heading back." "Got it," Zheng Qing muttered, eyes still locked on the talisman. The street remained quiet. Even the usual foot traffic had thinned out. Tree elves still cowered in their hollows. His footsteps echoed clearly on the stone path. Then he saw it. The second talisman hovered above the collapsed form of the wild boar demon. The creature's body was covered in bowl-sized wounds, blackened and sparking faintly. Its neck rolls were gone, exposing thick jawbones and broken tusks. The air smelled faintly of blood and singed hair. Zheng Qing kicked one of its hoofs. No movement. He tapped its belly. The flesh jiggled, but the beast remained still, eyes shut. He sighed in relief and looked back up at his drifting talisman. Finally, it was losing momentum, drifting lower and lower toward his hand. Then he heard it. Heavy breathing. Cold dread crept up his spine. He held his breath, lowered his gaze, and saw scarlet eyes, bloodthirsty, hungry, awake. Time froze. From a street corner, Thomas had just finished writing. He looked up and instantly spotted Zheng Qing and the demon. His stomach sank. He had no time. The spells in his law book were all devastating. Any of them would obliterate both the monster and Zheng Qing. He imagined the principal's furious roar, saw the pale, grieving faces of teachers. Regret stabbed through him. Then, a flicker of yellow. The talisman drifted down and landed gently on the demon's snout. The wild boar monster stared cross-eyed at it for a long moment. Then, slowly its breath began to ease. Its eyes closed, and it began to snore loudly. Zheng Qing collapsed backward onto the bluestone with a groan. "Thank the heavens," he muttered. "Best talisman I ever caught." The streets of Four Seasons Pavilion were paved with long, glistening bluestone slabs, neat, ancient, and steeped in history. In peaceful times, the street would be bustling with tourists. Mischievous tree elves often swung from the weeping willows lining the road, leaping from head to head and occasionally dropping twig-crafted trinkets on unsuspecting passersby. But not today. Today, the elves had vanished into their tree holes, trembling as the ground quaked and the trees shivered from the deafening drumming that echoed through the street. The cause? A wild boar demon. It tore through the road, its stubby hooves pounding against stone in a clattering rhythm like rain on broad banana leaves, or a pig skidding across porcelain. 3 glowing runes, summoned from Thomas's floating law book, drifted into the air and dissolved into threads of invisible breath, merging with the surrounding wind. The tree elves pressed themselves deeper into their bark-lined shelters. Something ominous was building in the air. Zheng Qing's eyes widened. The atmosphere felt angry, electric, buzzing with invisible needles that pricked the skin with every breath. Thomas stood firm before him, exhaling deeply. A low, reverberating rumble began to swell, distant and vast, as though thunder had started crawling across the horizon. Then Thomas glanced back with a devilish grin. "Cover your ears," he yelled. Zheng Qing's mouth moved, but no sound came out. He clamped his hands over his ears just as the sky seemed to explode. The thunder wasn't a clap. It was a barrage. It roared like bursting fireworks, echoing endlessly, engulfing every other sound in its wrath. The air screamed. Even with his ears covered, Zheng Qing felt the vibration rattle through his bones. The world shook. Then came the lightning. It cracked down onto the wild boar monster like a hammer from the gods. The boar shrieked, its tusks slicing through the edge of the barrier as the blast engulfed it. Flesh tore from its hide in bloodied chunks, scattering across the bluestone in a grisly trail. The scent of ozone mingled with the sharp tang of roasted meat. Zheng Qing gagged. The storm faded as quickly as it came. The air, once furious, returned to its usual warm stillness. The tree elves slowly unfurled themselves in their hollows, but none dared emerge. Zheng Qing wiped his face, took a breath, and looked at the smoking remains of the demon. "Is it dead?" he shouted. His ears still rang, so he had to raise his voice just to hear himself. Thomas shouted back, "Probably just unconscious. A massage of this level won't kill it." "A massage!" Zheng Qing yelled, exasperated. "That spell nearly exploded on top of us. You'd lose points for that kind of insult at Starry Sky Academy." Thomas bellowed with a laugh. Zheng Qing scowled. He'd just had his first real taste of the Academy's chaotic brand of magic, and it only confirmed one thing. He was glad he didn't enter that dream exam room. Just hours earlier, Thomas had seemed serious and dependable. But after summoning a full-on divine lightning storm, that image was completely shattered. "You want to go check if it's still breathing?" Thomas asked. "I'll wait until my calm heart talismans fall," Zheng Qing said, tilting his head upward. When the thunder hit, he'd panicked and lost grip of his talismans. A few were scorched to ash mid-air, but 2 had survived, now gently spiraling down on warm air currents. He decided to wait. Ever since learning he was a broke wizard, Zheng Qing had become extremely careful about preserving anything even remotely valuable. At Cloud Think Boutique, he overheard students mentioning a flea market at the academy where one could trade talismans, potions, and spell components for supplies. That little rumor sparked something in him. He had a stash of talismans under his bed. Maybe they'd be worth something. Leaping up, he snatched the lower of the 2 talismans from the air and stuffed it into his gray satchel. The second talisman, disturbed by the air current, drifted further away. Catching his breath, Zheng Qing followed it deeper into the street. Behind him, Thomas was scribbling in his law book with a quill, glancing up just long enough to caution, "Don't go too far. Once I'm done transcribing this spell, we're heading back." "Got it," Zheng Qing muttered, eyes still locked on the talisman. The street remained quiet. Even usual foot traffic had thinned out. Tree elves still cowered in their hollows. His footsteps echoed clearly on the stone path. Then he saw it. The second talisman hovered above the collapsed form of the wild boar demon. The creature's body was covered in bowl-sized wounds, blackened and sparking faintly. Its neck rolls were gone, exposing thick jawbones and broken tusks. The air smelled faintly of blood and singed hair. Zheng Qing kicked one of its hoofs. No movement. He tapped its belly. The flesh jiggled, but the beast remained still, eyes shut. He sighed in relief and looked back up at his drifting talisman. Finally, it was losing momentum, drifting lower and lower toward his hand. Then he heard it. Heavy breathing. Cold dread crept up his spine. He held his breath, lowered his gaze, and saw scarlet eyes, bloodthirsty, hungry, awake. Time froze. From a street corner, Thomas had just finished writing. He looked up and instantly spotted Zheng Qing and the demon. His stomach sank. He had no time. The spells in his law book were all devastating. Any of them would obliterate both the monster and Zheng Qing. He imagined the principal's furious roar, saw the pale, grieving faces of teachers. Regret stabbed through him. Then, a flicker of yellow. The talisman drifted down and landed gently on the demon's snout. The wild boar monster stared cross-eyed at it for a long moment. Then, slowly its breath began to ease. Its eyes closed, and it began to snore loudly. Zheng Qing collapsed backward onto the bluestone with a groan. "Thank the heavens," he muttered. "Best talisman I ever caught." After lunch, his dad pulled Zheng Qing into the room, handed him a bus ticket to Chang'an, and said, "You hardly asked for money from home for college. Even the flight tickets are arranged by the school. So, you need to feel comfortable when departing from home, and make sure to study hard in school. Don't waste such a good opportunity." Gazing at the white hair on his dad's temples, Zheng Qing blinked and nodded forcefully. "It's strange how your school only has one charter flight, and they don't accept parents to see off." Mom came into the room at some point and complained happily. "Well, are you sure you don't need money? You should bring some from home anyway." "There's no need. The school is closed off. There's nowhere to spend money." Zheng Qing thought about the shocking exchange rate between wizard's currency and soft girl coins, and felt regretful. These days, he has organized the talisman notebooks under his bed. There were less than 30 intact ones. According to the price he estimated from Four Seasons Pavilion, probably they can't even be exchanged for one jade coin. Perhaps he could consider earning a living by working part-time during his leisure time. With this thought, he felt a spark of excitement. "Just take it," Dad finally decided, handing over a bank card. "There are a few $1,000s in it. Just use it for daily expenses. The password is your birthday." Zheng Qing decided not to refuse any longer and bowed his head in acceptance. "You're leaving soon. Find some time to say goodbye to your classmates. Don't forget about Mr. Wu." Professor Zheng came out of the study and reminded him. "I know." Zheng Qing nodded vigorously. "I'm going to send you bookstore to see if the teacher is back today." On the day when he received the first college admission notice, Zheng Qing went to send you bookstore to find Mr. Wu. However, the bookstore was tightly closed. A notice board was placed on the windowsill, which read, "The owner is out. The store is temporarily closed for business." This had often happened over the past 10 years or so. Every autumn and winter, Mr. Wu would go out for a period with that yellow-flowered cat. Sometimes he would be gone for 10 days, sometimes for several months. Zheng Qing still remembered when he was 15, Mr. Wu left before the Mid-Autumn Festival and did not come back until the Spring Festival the following year. According to Mr. Wu, he was out to save the world. Upon hearing this, Zheng Qing would not ridicule him, but would merely keep his eyes on his nose on his heart, and remain silent. Seeing the black announcement board still hanging outside the window, Zheng Qing's disappointment was clear. It seemed the gentleman hadn't returned yet. Humans often feel fear in the face of new things. The thought of stepping into a completely unfamiliar environment made Zheng Qing feel a sense of apprehension. Agreeing to attend the top university, he couldn't help but wonder, was it too hasty? Sometimes Zheng Qing thought, no one in his family really understood this school. Was his rash decision okay? At times like these, he really hoped to receive guidance from the gentleman. He took off a wrinkled yellow talisman paper from behind the black announcement board. Looking left and right, Zheng Qing saw no strangers. He held the talisman paper in his palm, silently chanting a spell. The talisman paper twisted into the shape of a key and reluctantly slid into the keyhole. Zheng Qing turned the knob and opened the bookstore's door. He then took out the paper and glued it back behind the black announcement board. The store was deserted and extremely quiet. With no visitors for so long, the room was filled with the scent of books. Zheng Qing took a deep breath. A satisfying smell of books filled his lungs. When I'm old, I also want to have a large bookstore. Basking in the sun, lying in a deck chair with a book covering my face, inhaling the scent of books to my heart's content. Walking between the bookshelves, Zheng Qing thought with admiration. The bookstore was small, only about 40 or 50 square meters. The window and door headed north-south, and the bookshelves inside were also arranged in this orientation. In the southeast corner of the bookstore, there was a wooden ladder. Above the ladder was a narrow attic, filled with some sundries and dried fish from the yellow-flowered cat. Underneath the ladder was a tightly closed single-panel wooden door painted in dark black. The wooden door was less than 2 meters high and slightly over 1 meter wide. The door sill was about 2 inches high, with a pair of smooth cylindrical wood posts on either side that were just a tad taller than the door sill. They had no carving or any other decorations. No door god was affixed to the door. Only a rabbit hairbrush and a small pot of embroidered oil were hanging with a thin hemp rope. On the left side of the wooden door, there was a brass knocker with the shape of a turtleback snake. The holder was a turtle, while the knocker was a snake coiled on the turtle's back. The knocker was now tightly nestled on the turtle's back, leaving no leeway. The turtle was huddled in its shell, exposing 6 small pitch-black holes. Zheng Qing picked up the brush hanging on the door and gently scratched the snake's chin. The snake hissed and raised its body, revealing a door knocker. Zheng Qing took the brush, dipped it in the fragrant oil, and applied it to the snake tail. The snake quivered its tail. Slowly, a small head peered out from underneath the turtle shell. Click! A sound of unlocking came from the wooden door. Zheng Qing looked gratifyingly at the small turtle as it licked the fragrant oil on the snake tail clean, then pulled the snake-shaped door knocker and tugged hard. The wooden door was opened abruptly, and a dark corridor showed up before his eyes. This corridor was constructed specifically for Zheng Qing by the gentleman. Following the corridor for about 100 meters, he would find himself in the bookstore 9/2 of Huiziji. The gentleman was often not in the store, so Zheng Qing often helped look after the 2 stores on his days off. As he was not able to find Huiziji on his own yet, Mr. Wu helped him open a passage between the 2 stores. This way, even if the gentleman wasn't around, Zheng Qing could still keep an eye on both storefronts. In the past, Zheng Qing had always held the mystical passageway in reverence and had many wild thoughts. But after his clock journey at the Four Seasons Pavilion, he realized that the corridor was merely built by the application of superior magical skills. People often hold reverence for mysterious things they can't understand, but against an understandable, outstanding achievement, they can only have a sense of envy. Strolling in the corridor, Zheng Qing's longing for the top university resurged. He hoped someday he too could construct a marvelous corridor such as this. The bookstores on both ends of the corridor shared the same loneness and quietness. The yellow-flowered cat was nowhere to be seen. He glanced at the cat food box, threw away the already hardened dried fish, then portioned out some time to mop a bit of the dust in the room. He finally watered the few pots of clivia on the windowsill. When the bookstore was closed, some customers may list the books they need and slide the list through the door gap into the bookstore. Zheng Qing's main task was to collect these lists, select each book the customers needed from the bookshelf, and wrap them in parchment paper. The wrapped books are then placed next door at Spring Reviving Hall. The next time customers come, they can directly collect the books from Spring Reviving Hall. There weren't many customers this time, just 3. The books they purchased were mainly professional books on magic rune construction. Once Zheng Qing finished wrapping the books and writing the names on the parchment paper, he made a satisfactory stretch, observing the small bookstore. The bookstore 9/2 in Huiziji and the bookstore in Yunhua Residential Complex were similar in size. He remembered that the abandoned 3-used bookstore and Four Seasons Pavilion also had the same dimensions. He had been puzzled why the gentleman opened so many bookstores. He sighed, and holding 3 packages, Zheng Qing walked out of the bookstore. The streets were still scantily populated. It seemed this marketplace never had a bustling day. Maybe this was the stronghold of stubborn wizards as mentioned in history books. Zheng Qing grinned, realizing he had recently started to understand these previously unnoticed details. He read books for just a few more days, yet his understanding of the world had completely changed. Many details he had not noticed before now held deeper meanings in his eyes. For years later, after graduating from the university, how would he see the world? As he looked around, he observed the narrow street and its antiquated view with hope for the future. "Put the package on the counter yourself." A lazy voice came from beside Zheng Qing. He turned his head in surprise. At the entrance of the adjacent spring reviving hall, a young man in flip-flops, draped in a white robe, a bun made from his Taoist hairstyle, and holding a small teapot, was engrossed in an ancient threaded book. "Pan Elvier, you're reading the Golden Lotus again." Zheng Qing approached with a smile. The young man reading the book was Deng Xiaoxian, the younger manager of Spring Reviving Hall, known to everyone on the street as Little Manager Deng. As their stores were next to each other and they interacted frequently, Zheng Qing was quite familiar with the young shopkeeper. After some time, he took the liberty of giving him the nickname Pan Elvier. Unperturbed, Deng Xiaoxian frequently flaunted the nickname, claiming that it fit him quite well according to Zheng Qing's account. What nerve! Pan Elvier glanced at Zheng Qing, sipped some tea from his pot, and clearing his throat, he asked, "Heard you're going to the top university?" The comment made Zheng Qing's eyes light up. He suddenly remembered the gentleman once mentioned that Deng Xiaoxian had just recently graduated from a university. Perhaps he could give him some advice. His complexion is wax-colored, and he always wears a gray long suit with no collar on the left and a white robe outside. A lock of hair from his forehead dangles over his left eye. Zheng Qing still remembers the first time he saw Deng Xiaoxian. It was in early autumn 5 years ago. Old manager Deng grabbed that lock of hair on his forehead and dragged him to his spring reviving hall. His bellowing echoed down the whole street. "A bottle not full is just a shaking half bottle. Who do you think you are? What kind of skills do you have? Do you know the 15 uses of Mousinagine? You dare to prescribe medicines without even remembering their properties. And you dare to venture into the new world. If you run into trouble, it's just my bad luck. A childless end for the Deng family. What if you put the other members of the hunting team in trouble? Who are they going to complain to? Thought graduating as a registered wizard could change the world. What a ridiculous bluff. Do you think the big monsters outside are just paper-made?" Zheng Qing hovered at the door, watching the normally kindly-faced old doctor roaring with rage, tears pouring down his face. Pan Elvier simply hung his head, knelt in front of the shrine in the Spring Reviving Hall, and said nothing. From then on, the manager of the Spring Reviving Hall was replaced by this young man with a lock of hair hanging over his forehead. The merchants of Huiziji strictly adhered to the national regulations. They open at 9 in the morning and close sharp at 5 in the afternoon. Only Pan Elvier showed disdain, generally opening his shop lazily as late as 4. By 2 or 3 in the afternoon, his door was already half closed. From the day when old manager Deng handed over the keys to the shop to Pan Elvier, he was seldom seen, perhaps once in 3 or 5 years. He never hired any helpers, using his own hands to dispense medicine and see patients. On usual days, Pan Elvier used to concentrate on making remedies, refining pills and powders. Occasionally, when a customer came, he would either claim the manager was not in or fob off the customers with those concoctions, never really caring about the shop. His only focus was on memorizing books. Old manager Deng once said, if Pan Elvier wanted to leave, he must be able to proficiently prepare the family's 300 traditional remedies and 50 types of dissolution medicines. He should also be able to recite the tens of thousands of medicine methods from the 3 books Jin Kuei Ji Shi, Hold the Bottle, and Han, Mei, Dao, Chang Sha. Young manager Deng, in order to leave the spring reviving hall as soon as possible, began to madly memorize books. Zheng Qing chose a character from each of the 3 books Xiaoxian was memorizing and gave him a name, the Golden Lotus. Every time he saw him memorizing, he used the nickname to tease him. Pan Elvier would often puff up his nose and blow his lock of hair to float in the air, pretending to be angry. After placing the 3 packages wrapped in parchment on the counter of the spring reviving hall, Zheng Qing rushed out and asked Pan Elvier for advice on education, asking him if he had any good suggestions. "What kind of advice do you want to hear?" Deng Xiaoxian put down the book in his hand and sat upright. Zheng Qing was speechless. "I know more than 200 hidden passages between the 4 academies. I also know about the secret camps left by my predecessors in the Silent Forest. I even know which courses to choose in the second half of the term to get more credits easily. But I can't tell you. Every student, before leaving school, will sign a silence contract with the school to keep everything about the school confidential. This contract, drawn up by the Joint Committee of Professors from the First University, was approved by the Wizard Council and had a remarkably striking effect." Seeing that Zheng Qing seemed disappointed, young manager Deng rolled up the Golden Lotus in his hand and admonished, "The First University is a hallowed ground. It can help you grow and mature rapidly. The joy of life resides behind growth. It's like playing a game. If you use cheats to pass the levels, where's the fun in that? I only have one piece of advice for you. Make more friends and participate in more social activities." Deng Xiaoxian held up 2 fingers and ended his piece of advice. "That's 2. Zheng Qing corrected. A customer came to Spring Reviving Hall to collect their medicine. Pan Elvier glanced at Zheng Qing, blew his lock of hair over his forehead again, and led the customer into the shop. Zheng Qing sighed a breath of relief. No one could guess why, but he felt much lighter. Huiziji is a very small market. It's so small that trading goods for goods, the primitive way of trading, is still being used in this market. The whole market only has about 20 shops. The streets are old and the shops are simple. Many of them just straight written their names on the shop signs, with no additional fancy magic effects." This gave Zheng Qing, who was baptized to the splendid magic at 4 Seasons Pavilion, a sense of contrast. He felt he had a duty to help his hometown to change this backward image. "Xiaoqing, is your last batch of talisman paper used up? How are your preparations for going to university?" Granny Kai from Bai Chao Tang called out to Zheng Qing with a smile. Bai Chao Tang is a shop in Huiziji that specializes in talisman paper, cinnabar, brush and ink, etc. For a while, Granny Kai agreed to exchange Zheng Qing's completed talisman scrolls for brand new empty scrolls, which touched Zheng Qing. "I still have some of the last batch of talisman paper, but since I'm going to university, I'll probably not come back for a while, so I'm planning to take some more," Zheng Qing answered respectfully. A couple of days ago, when he came back from 4 Seasons Pavilion, he rushed directly to Huiziji to ask these old shopkeepers about the First University. Unexpectedly, the shopkeepers on the market hadn't been to university. They just heard that the university is excellent. They didn't know anything else more than Zheng Qing. The only one among them who had studied, Pan Elvier, was nowhere to be found. He even didn't open his shop for a few days. Incredibly frustrating. However, the shop owners in the market are old and experienced. They threw in their seasoned advices. Granny Kai suggested Zheng Qing leave a letter stating his circumstances. She could help forward it to Mr. Wu. Boss Wang from the Daili Ji suggested Zheng Qing bring some jade tags and pendants, as they made excellent gifts for classmates. Dr. Li from Ben Xiao Ju strongly advised Zheng Qing to carry with him a few medical patches. Be prepared for everything. The food and drink served outside always need to be wary of. If anything happens like a fall or injury, the school doctor will surely not be by your side all their time. Keep several common use patches in your bag. I think you would find it assuring. At the time, Zheng Qing gratefully accepted these gifts. After he got home, the more he thought about it, the more he felt awkward. He kept racking his brains for a few days, and finally he had a good idea. He planned to help the old shops in the Huiziji to set up more modern and dazzling signboards. Just like the shops in the Four Seasons Pavilion, they look really up-end and lavish. So today, he came to the market, intending to do some preparatory work. Xiaoqing, did you forget something? Did you remember not having taken along the granddaughter of Boss Huang? You're late. She's been sent up to the mountains by Boss. With a university education, you surely have many ideas. You're measuring things here. Are you planning to take over all our old shops? In a small market, Zheng Qing's measuring caused a crowd of shop owners to gather, making fun of him. He made excuses everywhere in embarrassment, did a quick measurement of the shop's frontage, and then ran away in a hurry. Next time when he comes back, he will surely show these old-fashioned store owners the brilliance of modern magic. Zheng Qing had a menacing thought at the bottom of his heart. Auspicious for weddings, adoption, opening a business, and traveling. Inauspicious for breaking ground. Chang'an Airport. Zheng Qing felt content with the school's chosen date after calculating the fortune for quite some time. Before heading to the airport, he made a trip to Huiziji to inquire about the boarding process from Pan Elvier. You take your boarding pass and find an airport staff at any vacant counter to exchange it for an entry card. Then just follow the instructions on the card to board the plane, explained Pan Elvier patiently, but Zheng Qing still had his reservations. Any counter? Why do I need to find a vacant one? He asked further. Aren't queues slower? Pan Elvier, looking at Zheng Qing as if he were a fool, said, Why would you line up in crowded counters when there are empty ones available? Zheng Qing bowed his head in silence, jotting down the process in his small notebook. When you're out in the world, ask if you don't understand, don't be shy. Many people are taking flights for the first time. There are information desks everywhere in the airport. You can ask any pretty lady, Pan Elvier said impatiently, waving his hand in dismissal. Can I go to any regular information desk at the airport? Zheng Qing emphasized the word regular. What? Do you want the first college to hang a Wizard's Alliance sign in Chang'an Airport? Pan Elvier gave him an eye roll, his lengthy hair blowing in the air. Zheng Qing was veritably speechless. He assumed, probably and vaguely, that the boarding process should be in the wizard style, like walking through a specific wall with your luggage, or maybe chanting a spell into a strange mirror located in an abandoned airport restroom. However, reality was much simpler. With his ticket in hand, Zheng Qing found a vacant counter and exchanged it for a boarding pass in less than a minute. There were no luggage checks, no long waiting times, not even tedious inspections or complex gates. Zheng Qing mentioned an additional pet carry-on, held Poseidon in his arms, and entered the waiting hall. The hall staff led him to a VIP entrance and said goodbye politely. Following the signs, Zheng Qing walked over a plush red carpet, through a stiff aisle, past some loose coverings, and swiftly boarded the plane headed for First College. The cabin interior was far more spacious than it appeared from outside, with 2 seats to the left and 1 to the right. Every 2 rows of seats faced each other. The cabin crew wore firm dark blue robes with their hair tied up in a bun, a professional smile on their faces, law books in one hand, and the other guiding Zheng Qing to his seat. Zheng Qing noticed the law book that the flight attendant held was the same Bologna edition he saw in the original bookstore. Its attractive decorations and resplendent floret were waiting for him in an immaculate manner. The flight attendants seemed very wealthy, thought Zheng Qing, awestruck. He remembered that the law book cost more than 20 jade coins at the original bookstore, whereas his full scholarship was only worth 10 jade coins. Guided by the flight attendant, Zheng Qing easily found his seat. His seat was on the left side by the aisle in the 5th row. The surrounding passengers had settled down, and the only empty seat was the window seat next to him. Zheng Qing prayed in his heart that the seat belonged to a beautiful girl. The seat was spacious and the black leather was soft, making him feel relaxed as soon as he sat down. The silver metal sheen sparked off the armrests on both sides, causing his arm to keep sliding back into his lap. With Poseidon on his lap, Zheng Qing took a good look at the fellow passengers around him. The boy occupying the seat opposite him was short with a watermelon head haircut and wore huge black-framed glasses. He held a large black hardcover notebook and was writing quickly. Next to the watermelon head boy sat an elegant-looking boy, medium hair tied in a ponytail, cradling a suspicious long parcel, silently gazing out at the dry concrete ground outside the window. Could be a girl, could also be a boy. The uncertainty weighed heavily in Zheng Qing's mind as he turned to examine the other two people across the aisle. Across the aisle sat a bald, chubby boy in gray clothes, with a string of dark purple lychee rosaries hung around his neck, engrossed in a scroll while shaking his head. Occupying the seat opposite the chubby boy was a passenger whose head was buried on the table, fast asleep. Zheng Qing could only speculate about this passenger's identity through their burgundy-colored wavy hair. A quick scan around the cabin, and none of the gaze met with his. Zheng Qing suddenly felt bored. He then pulled out his talisman scroll from the gray cloth bag, unfolded the hidden table from the armrest, took out his brush and ink slab, rubbed his hands, and started his daily practice work. The talisman scroll was from Huiziji, with a return grid, yellow paper. One scroll contains 60 pages. Each page carries a commonly used talisman, such as exorcism, tranquility, exorcism, prayer, invitation, transmigration, and so on. Once done imitating, the talisman could be torn off and used at any time. If not used, it could be sold back to a stationery shop. 6 perfectly written talismans could be exchanged for one blank scroll, a fair deal for young and old. If an entire talisman scroll was written flawlessly, Zheng Qing could exchange it for 10 scrolls, and Granny Kai from Bai Chao Tang would give him an ink slab or a sheep hairbrush with a broad grin. Since the age of 10, Zheng Qing never had to spend money on talisman scrolls. Even the ink slab and brush he received from a stationery shop owner would last many years. Heaving on the ink slab and caressing it with a brush, he held it up, focused his spirit, made a stroke, and it was done. Zheng Qing nodded at the tranquility talisman, satisfied. Nothing is more relaxing than writing a talisman. If there is, then it would be writing 2 talismans. As he picked up his brush again, he was interrupted by a voice. "Hello," a timid voice rang in his ear. Zheng Qing looked up. A little girl, about 10 years old, was standing in front of him looking uneasy, dragging a pink suitcase. The girl wore 2 horn braids, a pink dress, and white round head leather shoes. She clutched a crumpled boarding pass in her hand. "Loli," Zheng Qing roared in his heart. From the corner of his eye, he saw the watermelon head boy opposite him put down his pen and lifted his head to look over. "It seems I am in the inside seat," the little Loli said gently. "Oh, sorry. Please come in." Zheng Qing hastily got up, putting on a kind smile. "Where is your family? Aren't they following you?" As he spoke, he helped the little girl stuff her pink suitcase into the overhead bin. Zheng Qing had already stuffed his heavy luggage into his gray bag. He didn't expect that some wizards would drag this cumbersome luggage around. Didn't the notice from the first college say parents aren't allowed to accompany? The little Loli's surprised voice echoed behind him. Zheng Qing's hand slipped, almost getting hit on the head by the pink suitcase. He stuffed the case into the bin and shut the bin door firmly. Then he lowered his head and looked at the little Loli standing before him. "This kid is my classmate." The pigeon was pure white, without a hint of other colors. Its eyes were lively and pitch black, its claws a tender yellow, looking exceptionally clean. In contrast, the little fox opposite it also had white fur, but with light blue patterns streaked across it. At this moment, the little fox was twiddling its paws, flicking its large tail, and nonchalantly attempting to touch the pigeon's head. The pigeon was the pet of a little girl in pink clothing. It had flown from who knows where and perched on the girl's shoulder after she had taken her seat, cooing incessantly. The fox was Poseidon. Originally weary from the journey, Poseidon's mood had lifted slightly upon seeing the new little bird next to him. The pigeon spread its wings slightly, held its head up high, and stared at the mischievous little fox nearby. Its throat emitted urgent cooing sounds of warning. The pigeon had not been debeaked, so its beak was very sharp. The semi-transparent keratin layer of its beak showed an orange hue under the sunlight. The little fox carefully withdrew its paw, looked at Zheng Qing with an aggrieved whimper, tucked back its tail, and deflated. Zheng Qing let out an awkward laugh. He had not yet recovered from the shock earlier. Turning his head, he gave the little girl another look. Finally, he couldn't help but ask, "Are you really going to the top university as a freshman?" The little girl pouted her mouth and didn't answer, much like the pigeon on her shoulder. "Sorry, I'm just a little shocked." Zheng Qing, feeling a bit abrupt, apologized sincerely. He took out a snack box from his bag, opened it, and offered it to the little girl. "Would you like some snacks?" In the box were pine nuts, hazelnuts, figs, peas, peanuts, and other dried fruits. Zheng Qing had bought them all from Cultivation. They were all shelled and very convenient to eat. Before the little girl could answer, her pigeon had already jumped onto Zheng Qing's wrist and eagerly took a melon seed in its beak and gulped it down. Now it was the little girl's turn to be awkward. "My name is Li Meng. I was admitted to the first top university, Jiuyou Academy. This is my admission notice." The little girl took out a hard-shell admission notice from her backpack and showed it to Zheng Qing. The admission notice had a triangular symbol encased in a circle, the symbol of the top university. "I'm from Jiuyou Academy 2, Astronomy Class 08-1, Zheng Qing." He shoved the snack box into Li Meng's arms and complimented her. "You're amazing. I thought the school only admitted students above 18. I didn't expect this at all. I'm also from Astronomy Class 08-1. Li Meng excitedly replied, munching on a piece of pistachio. "I fell asleep during my night study class and ended up being pulled into the exam hall of the top university. My interviewer told me that I'm probably the youngest examinee in the recent century." The little girl looked at Zheng Qing with a proud face, as if waiting for compliments. "That's amazing." Zheng Qing laughed and applauded, but couldn't resist asking, "Why only probably the youngest examinee of the recent century? Are there any younger than you?" Li Meng pouted and shook her head, indicating she had no clue. "Because among the students admitted this year, there's another 12-year-old freshman. He's the youngest enrollee of the top university in the past 100 years." The boy with a watermelon head haircut jumped into their conversation. 12 years old. Zheng Qing was stunned. "Which academy is he from? Does the school allow such young students?" "I'm also 12 years old." Li Meng shouted discontentedly. "Why is he the youngest one?" The round-faced boy with the watermelon head haircut glanced at the box of dried fruits in Li Meng's arms. "I'm sorry, I didn't ask for your name." Zheng Qing obediently took out another box of dried fruits and offered it to Watermelon Head. "You should try these. This is the dried fruit fried by Grandma Song at Cultivation. It's very delicious." Cultivation? Watermelon Head looked at Zheng Qing closely, silently pinched a walnut, and threw it into his mouth. By the side, the pigeon and Poseidon were tangled up in Li Meng's arms, waiting patiently for the little girl to choose delicious dried fruits for them. Li Meng was happily stroking Poseidon's fluffy fur and occasionally scratched its ears. Zheng Qing snorted as he side-eyed the little rascal, Poseidon. "Xiao xiao." Xiao as in Xiao say, melancholy, and xiao as in laughter. The watermelon head boy finished eating his dried fruit, dusted his hands, reopened his heavy hardcover notebook on the small table, flipping through it while quickly saying, "I am also a freshman at Jiuyou Academy. In fact, all the new students in this cabin belong to Jiuyou Academy. This year, the top university has two very young enrollees, both 12 years old. One girl, our little lady right here, and another boy named Lingua was admitted to Alpha Academy." Xiao Xiao glanced at Li Meng and adjusted his glasses. "The reason he ranks before you is because Lingua was admitted without examination. In fact, he could have entered the school when he was 10 years old, but due to his age, the school postponed his enrollment." "Don't call me little lady. Call me college student." Li Meng protested loudly. Xiao Xiao didn't reply. He just lowered his head and tugged at his trouser leg. Zheng Qing noticed a turtle, the size of a palm and with a dull shell color, crawling out from under Xiao Xiao's seat. It was biting his trouser leg, stretching its neck, and tugging hard. Xiao Xiao sighed, picked up the turtle, and placed it on his lap, asking for some pine nuts from Zheng Qing. The turtle looked very old. Its eyes were cloudy with white film growing at the corners. Its rough skin was crumpled with a multitude of fine wrinkles, and its dull yellow shell appeared as if it had been struck hard, revealing many cracks. Poseidon, as if having found a new toy, broke free from Li Meng's arms, jumped into Xiao Zhao's lap, and pressed both its front paws hard on the old turtle. The old turtle casually savored the pine nuts, completely ignoring the jumpy thing on its back. It only swayed its head, expressing slight annoyance when Poseidon tried to nibble on its head. "Poseidon, come back!" Zheng Qing felt a little embarrassed, leaned over, grabbed the struggling little fox back into his arms, and gently pinched its cheek. "Stay put." Poseidon whined, swinging his large tail all over, resolutely uncooperative. Poseidon, such a powerful name. Li Meng was combing her pigeon's feathers with admiration in her eyes. Unlike my Xiao Bai, I had named it so simply at first. I couldn't even change it later. Zheng Qing's mouth twitched as he watched the pigeon, standing tall and proud. It was very satisfied with its own name. "Welcome aboard which Union Moonfall Airline Company's direct flight for Jiuyo Academy. I am the chief steward, Su Qijuan, and I am delighted to serve you all. The estimated flight time for our journey is 5 hours and 35 minutes. We have prepared scrumptious lunches for everyone during the journey. After takeoff, please proceed to the self-service restaurant as per your convenience. If you need any other assistance, please press the red button overhead, and our cabin crew will be at your service wholeheartedly. Our flight is about to take off. The flight attendants will carry out a safety check routine. Students, please sit in your seats, fold up the tray tables, fasten your seat belts, and hold your pets in your laps. Thank you for your cooperation, and we wish you a pleasant journey." "Su Qijuan," Li Meng shrieked. "What's her relationship with Su Shijun? Should I ask her for an autograph or a picture together? They're both young descendants of the Qingqiu Su family with a hierarchical name Su. Just by hearing their names, one can tell." Xiao Xiao put away his notebook, held his old tortoise in his arms, and sat upright. "Anyway, she's not Su Shijun. What use will her photograph be?" "Who is Su Shijun?" Zheng Qing, while folding his tray table, couldn't help asking. "She's the youngest upper council member of the Under the Moon Council, the pre-designated heir of the Qingqiu Su family, a wizard who allegedly achieved the realm of 5 tails and who is currently undergoing an evaluation by a Grand Wizard Council. She is the most beautiful woman in the wizard world." Without batting an eye, Xiao Xiao quickly replied, "No, she's a goddess. The goddess of all male wizards in the wizard world." "A goddess, huh?" Holding Poseidon in his arms, Zheng Qing peeked down the aisle. A flight attendant, dressed in a crisp uniform, was leaning down and softly speaking something to a student in the front row, with a smile on her face. The tight uniform perfectly framed her exquisite figure, and her long legs enhanced this visual impact even more. Zheng Qing quickly averted his gaze after swallowing hard. "Don't stare, don't stare, don't stare." He repeated the mantra 3 times in his mind, but the tempting vision from just a moment ago still lingered. Young people are always so full of vigor. He comforted himself, changing his sitting posture, and took out an almond from the box to munch on. "Dear student, our flight is about to take off. For your and everyone's safety, please fold up your tray table." The pleasant voice resonated from nearby. Zheng Qing turned his head. A flight attendant was quietly waking up a student with wine-red wavy hair who was sleeping across the aisle. Across the aisle and 2 seats away sat a young monk in a plain gray robe, while the other passenger had been sleeping on the tray table since Zheng Qing boarded the plane. The monk had already put away his sutra and was meditating. Meanwhile, the person with the wine-red wavy hair, on the other hand, had been sleeping since the time Zheng Qing had got on the plane. Even after repeated calls from the flight attendant, the passenger with wine-red wavy hair shook his head, lifted it, revealing a delicate face. Natural beauty without makeup, Zheng Qing appreciated in his mind. Even compared to the flight attendant nearby, she was not any less attractive. Lazily stretching her arms and yawning, the passenger with wine-red wavy hair lifted her sleepy eyes, folded up the tray table, then pulled out an eye mask from a Cohen bag, put it on, leaned on the spacious seat, and went back to sleep again. This left Zheng Qing somewhat disappointed. "What is it you're holding in your arms?" Don't you need to put it away? Li Ming asked the passenger sitting across from her. What's your name, and which class of Juyo Academy are you in? Across from Li Ming was a student with a delicate face. Her long black hair was tied at the roots and tucked into the large hood of her white dress. A purple scarf was casually draped around her shoulders, and she held a long package in her hands, watching outside the window. Zheng Qing rubbed his aching head with annoyance. Just 5 minutes ago, the little girl was still looking timid and scared. Now that she was a bit familiar with everyone, she had started to chatter nonstop. Maybe she should have chosen a sparrow as a pet instead of pigeon. The scarf around your neck is so beautiful. What is it made of? Turning his head, Zheng Qing saw Li Ming leaning forward to touch the purple scarf, even patting it. Wow, it feels great, exclaimed Li Ming. Chitter, a fluffy little purple mink stuck its head out from the large hood at the back of the scarf owner, let out a threatening sound. The purple scarf shook a few times and was promptly pulled back into the hood. Zheng Qing was taken aback too. So, it wasn't a scarf, it was a purple mink's tail. Li Ming was stunned and then pouted, her eyes welling up with tears, and her eyes started to redden. My name is Bluebird, and this is a sword. Finally, the owner of the purple mink spoke. His gaze left the window, and pointing at the long package in his arms, he awkwardly comforted her. Don't cry. It was a male voice, Zheng Qing finally confirmed. Li Ming, with her eyes still red, sniffed and flashed a beaming smile. I'm not crying. I'm a college student now. The little purple mink seemed quite proud. It climbed on a bluebird's left shoulder with its front claws, stretched lazily, and opened its mouth wide, showing its sharp teeth. Poseidon looked at the little mink with keen interest, wagging his big tail. The pigeon on Li Ming's shoulder squawked angrily, flapped its wings, trying to intimidate the purple mink across the aisle. Students, please keep your pets in your arms. We are about to take off. A sweet voice of a flight attendant was heard nearby, and Zheng Qing immediately turned around, putting forth a strict expression. A refreshing sweet smell drifted over, accompanied by the sound of clicking heels. The bewitching silhouette appeared before Zheng Qing's eyes once again, but this time quite close. The flight attendant leaned over and pulled up the sunshade on the window, and then bent down to check the seatbelts of the passengers. Zheng Qing's nostrils were filled with a heady fragrance. He stiffened nervously, not daring to move. Poseidon in his arms choked due to the tight grip and squealed. What a cute little thing. The flight attendant said affectionately as she scratched Poseidon's ear. Zheng Qing could clearly see the nostrils of the flight attendant rapidly flaring. Looking up, he saw a pair of deep red eyes. The crystal-clear gaze was like 2 warm springs, making him lose himself in them. By the time he came to, the plane had started to fly smoothly. People around him were engrossed in a heated discussion. Even the little monk across the aisle had joined their conversation. How did you all receive your admission notices? Xiao Xiao lowered the tray table in front of him again and was jotting something down on his black notebook. Amit Ba, while I was copying scriptures in my monastery scripture hall, I found my admission letter in the pages of the Diamond Sutra. After reporting to the head monk, the abbot gave me a manifesto saying, all conditioned phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a flash of lightning. Buddhists should perceive contemplation in this way. So, here I am. The little monk beside him twisted his prayer beads, making a rustling sound. I killed a wild demon in the Chilean mountains and found the admission letter in its belly. Bluebird was still sparing with his words. Zheng Qing clicked his tongue, suddenly feeling that the way he received his admission letter was a little too simple. My cousin and I shocked everyone this year by entering Juyo Academy, turning our old-fashioned relatives pale. Li Mengxing expresses with enthusiasm. My acceptance letter was delivered by my cousin. She is also a freshman at Juyo Academy this year, so our acceptance letters were both given to her to pass on to me. She's expected to take care of you at school. Zheng Qing thought silently. My sister is ranked 3rd among this year's freshmen. I'll have her cover for you guys in the future. Leave everything to me. The young girl beats her chest with excitement. Xiao Xiao glanced at Zheng Qing. I found my acceptance letter when I woke up in the morning. Honestly, I was terrified by this sudden, strange object. I almost changed all the talismans in my house. Zheng Qing couldn't help but laugh as he remembered the morning he received his acceptance letter. "What about you?" "Watermelon head," asked Li Meng, without a shred of courtesy, to Xiao Xiao. "Me?" Xiao Xiao glanced at her, then set aside his writing brush. "I was specially admitted to school. I didn't receive an acceptance letter." Zheng Qing didn't immediately question Xiao Xiao about what it meant to be specially admitted to school. He was cautiously covering his hair, giving the floating sprite in front of him a tense look. This sprite, dressed in a tidy uniform identical to that of a flight attendant's, was emitting a faint green glow. Its thin antennae trembled slightly, and its pair of large black eyes were round and shining as it continuously called out. "What are they going to do?" he cried out nervously. "Just bringing some drinks. Why are you so nervous?" Li Meng poked her own cheek with her fingertip, sticking out her tongue. Shy, scared of sprites, and yet you're a college student." Zheng Qing's face immediately turned red. He noticed the giant glass bottle the sprite was carrying under her tiny arm. The orange drink inside was continuously bubbling. "I'm not scared. It's just that I was attacked by these things before, so I think I need to be careful." He let go of his hair and emphasized, "Haven't you guys been attacked by these things?" The magical experience at the Shangyuan bookstore alchemy workshop was unforgettable for him. Whether it was the old craftsman's brutal blood alchemy or the peculiar movements of the sprites pulling his hair, it all remained fresh in his memory. The magical creature realm, alchemical creature door, elves gang, winged eye order, sprite family, green sprite species. Xiao Xiao was staring at the sprite floating in the air and quickly explained, "These are extremely docile magical creatures that almost never attack humans. In the Wizard Alliance's Magic Creature Guidebook, they're listed as completely harmless creatures. Their threat level is even lower than that of slugs." Zheng Qing blinked his eyes. He basically only understood the last sentence, that these sprites are harmless creatures. "Damn top student." Li Meng looked at Xiao Xiao in surprise, her mouth bursting out with coarse language that was inappropriate for her age and identity. "Did you mean that by specially admitted student? Are you Jiuyo Academy's top freshman? What were your scores on the Global Wizarding Higher Education General Examination? How old are you this year?" The young lady was squirming in her seat, trying hard to attract Xiao Xiao's attention. The dove named Xiao Bai was flapping its wings, cooing along with her. Poseidon, who was napping in Zheng Qing's arms, was disturbed by this noise and made an annoyed squeak. The sprite floating in mid-air looked frightened, the drink bottle swaying in her hands. It looked like it was about to spill at any moment, making Zheng Qing extremely nervous. Xiao Xiao didn't say a word, merely adjusting his bespectacled eyes, glancing at Zheng Qing. Zheng Qing hadn't recovered from the shock of learning that the sprites were harmless creatures. His mind was filled with querying where he had wronged these little creatures. /P. Seeing Xiao Xiao's gaze, he immediately cried out, "I didn't provoke them. They attacked me on their own accord." Magical creatures do have some inherent instability, but any unstable outburst has its trigger. Xiao Xiao took a transparent glass cup from the cart next to him and placed it on the tray table. The sprite was hauling the giant drink bottle, calling out constantly, and filled his cup with the orange drink. "Aren't you guys going to have some?" He raised his cup to Zheng Qing and Li Meng. "Sugar-free orange juice, it's good for the body." "I want green bee." Li Meng was enthusiastically raising her hand, calling out, "Minors can't drink alcoholic beverages." Xiao Xiao shook his head, handing her cup of orange juice. Li Meng muttered under her breath, pouting, and took it. "I just want some water," sighed Zheng Qing as he watched Xiao Xiao. "You're 12 years old this year." Xiao Xiao raised an eyebrow. Zheng Qing drooped dispiritedly and went to find a cup himself. After the sprite finished serving the drinks and left, the conversation in the compartment naturally shifted back to the matter of the acceptance letters. Every time he thought about his acceptance letter, Zheng Qing felt a desire to criticize it. "Don't you all think the way these acceptance letters are delivered is, well, a little impolite?" "Impolite," Xiao Xiao set the drink in his hand on the table, curiously opening his black shell notebook. They don't exactly respect one's privacy. The school could just send this kind of thing to our mailbox. Zheng Qing grumbled. Or make a phone call as a courtesy. At least they wouldn't scare people into having a heart attack. For wizards, the soul is the only universally recognized form of privacy. Xiao Xiao didn't think much of it, his pen swiftly writing in the notebook. As for the way the school delivers acceptance letters, I happen to know a bit about that. This method of delivery, along with the school's student selection method, are all part of the ancient rites of the first university and are not controlled by the school's wizards. In turn, there are some abrupt and impertinent aspects. Zheng Qing recalled what Thomas had said, and he somewhat understood Xiao Zhao's meaning. But I still think this kind of custom is not good. Zheng Qing still persisted with his own opinion. The power of tradition is fundamental and deeply rooted everywhere and in every power structure. Or to put another way, tradition shapes customs, and customs sustain society. The First University is no exception. It is also a society formed by various customs and traditions. Xiao Xiao took the conversation to a more profound level. Makes sense. Zheng Qing felt the conversation was becoming a little complicated. Although there's nothing wrong with treating tradition as tradition, it's also necessary to evolve and improve in the process of inheritance. So I still think there are areas for improvement in the way the school delivers acceptance letters. Tradition is not immutable. Xiao Zhao's face showed a trace of seriousness. But no matter what, the current traditions are still being maintained, and we can only accept these traditions. Blue Bird tilted its head to silently communicate with Xiao Bai. Shi Yuan quietly counted his prayer beads. Li Meng blinked her eyes, staring blankly at the two people engaged in conversation. A sense of solemnity rose in Zheng Qing's heart.